everyone, and welcome to the 15th episode of Slime Time, the official Dragon's Den Dragon Quest podcast. This is one of your hosts, Plattym3.
And this is Liamland. So, Platty, I ran afoul of the horrendous Quest of the Stars RNG once again.
Still trying for that Falcon Blade there?
Yeah, no Falcon Blade. So they had another temporary Tombola about a week or so ago that had a Falcon Blade in it. And anyone listening to our previous Quest of the Stars podcast or just hears me ranting in chats, forums, or social media about it, this is the weapon I desire greatly as it's my weapon of choice for Dragon Quest IX. So anyway, I must have blown about like 1,200 gems on 10 pulls for the stupid Tombola. And did I get one Falcon Blade? Hell no.
I'm sure not. What did you get?
It was just a bunch of crappy 3-star items and about 4 5-star pants.
Yeah, well, that's something. Good job with the pants.
Well, the crotches of all my characters are well protected, but I still didn't get the Falcon Blade. And then, of course, this week the Tombola is gone again, and they have something else in place. Why do they do that? Why can't I just buy the damn sword with in-game currency?
That would make them not gotcha, and you gotta be a gotcha.
Yeah. Well, it's the law of averages. If I keep playing, I'll eventually get it. It might be right before the servers come down and the game sunsets, but for that split second before that happens, I'll have my Falcon Blade.
And, at some point that'll probably happen, but not right now.
Wasn't meant to be yet.
Nope.
All right. So joining us tonight, we have from the RPG Backtrack podcast on RP Gamer, Mr. Phil Willis.
Yeah, where you get to hear us talk about RPGs from the way back when, right up through yesteryear.
That's right. And hey, we're going to talk about an RPG from way back when. So, hey, Phil, welcome to our podcast.
Salutations.
And returning for our third time, we got Mr. Yangus, the Legendary Bandit. We have Zachary with us.
Howdy, everybody. The note's telling me that I need to do some sort of equivalent to the underpants dance, so I'm just going to wave my phone around for a bit. You can't see it, but on it is a picture of me getting a Falcon Blade in Dragon Quest Stars, and I told Liam all about that. I know he was
Yeah. You're like, oh, it didn't even try very hard.
No, one day I logged in, I did the free poll, and it's like, hey, you got a Giga Ultra Rare item, or whatever they call it. Oh, you got an Ultra Giga Rare, and it was a Falcon Blade. I'm like, well, Liam's going to be pissed. If it makes you feel better, though, Liam, I do have a character of you in the game, and he does have that equipped. So.
Oh, I appreciate that. That's very honored.
Living vicariously.
I'm honored.
In Dragon Quest 3 in that playthrough, you have a Falcon Blade in there, too. So
nice.
You might not have it yourself, but other versions of you do have it. So
yeah. All right. Much appreciated.
Somewhere out in the Dragon Quest DQMU multiverse. Yes.
Oh yeah, there is a DQ4 event going on right now.
Yes, there is.
You can play, and you can play with like the NPC character instead of being a random NPC of a friend in the game. It's like an actual character, like Ragnar. Or yeah, you can actually play with Kirill or Christo, and he's got the thwack spell, and it fails utterly. It's very, very realistic to the game. So okay, but tonight we're going to talk about Dragon Quest IV for real this time.
That's right. If you listened to our last episode, it was our April Fool's episode where we had Westy on, and we kind of lightly touched on Dragon Quest IV, or what we pretended might have been Dragon Quest IV.
Yeah, with some truths and some falsehoods. And tonight we're actually going to focus on the game itself.
But before we do that, let's get to know our guest. Phil here. I've talked about on our podcast here how I write reviews for RP Gamer, and I guest on their various podcasts from time to time. Zachary and I run a turn-based RPG group on Facebook, and about 2 years ago, Phil jumped on and he messaged me and he's like, hey, I have a podcast where I talk about old games. Do you think it'd be great to post about my podcast on here? I was like, yeah, sure, go right ahead. So Phil and I got chatting over Messenger through the months, and I started listening to his podcast, and next thing I know, I'd kind of listened to about 120 episodes of it, kind of went through the backtrack of the RPG backtrack, and suddenly Phil's suckering me into applying for RP Gamer, and for the last 20 months I've been on there, and I've done some shows with him. And it's been a fun time for me, and I've enjoyed getting to know Phil, and Hope you guys do too right now. So, Phil, I'm going to let you talk right now. What's your origin story with RP Gamer? How long have you been on there, and how would you get going with the RPG backtrack?
First, I just want to say congratulations. If you survived 100+ episodes of us ranting on for 3 to 4 hours a pop about old RPGs from the way back when through years, that should be like an achievement. Like, did something, just out of curiosity, after you listened to the 100th episode, did you see this big banner flash across your eyes? Achievement unlocked. What RPG backtrack Centennial? Did that happen?
No, I didn't. And, I've got this podcast app, and it records literally how many hours I have listened to your show. Oh, my God. I'll have to look it up while we're talking here at some point. But it's something like 20 days worth of time I've spent listening
Good
to.
grief. 20 days of your life you'll never get back again.
But,
God
it's
bless your
probably
heart.
not 20 days. It's probably like 15 because I usually listen at about 1.3 speed or something like that. So...
That's also impressive because, generally speaking, I compress when I do the editing. I compress it down to about probably to a 1.2 is at the end of the day. So that's pretty impressive.
I remember I messaged you almost 2 years ago, or I messaged somebody. What was it, Kelly or somebody? I was like, I'm really impressed about, they just keep rattling these facts off, and it's ridiculously fast, even at normal speed. And that's when you got back, and you were like, oh, I cut out all the silences and speed it up anyway.
Yeah, it's a wonder what you can do with the filters with Audacity.
Mm-hmm.
So
and I'll tell you what, I've taken your idea. We do that too. We cut out about 5 to 10 minutes of every episode by using that, getting rid of that audio spaces.
You're a pretty good speaker. You're pretty quick just listening to you now. So I'd imagine it doesn't help you nearly as much as it does for us on the RPG backtrack, where it'll take out half an hour or more as we collect our thoughts.
You also go 5 hours.
Right?
Occasionally.
So what was the question again? Secret origin or something?
Yeah, what was your origin with RP Gamer, and how do you get going with take over the RPG backtrack?
So I started off with RP Gamer shortly after I moved to the great state of Utah about 10 or 11 years ago. I, starting a new chapter in my life, had a new job, et cetera, and was looking for a new group of friends. And in Utah, it's a little different. Finding friends in Utah is a lot different than Florida. So I looked online, and I had seen RP Gamer before, and they had the big hiring call on their front page. So I figured, what the hell? I'll go ahead and give it a shot. I got hired. I use that air quotes because they don't actually pay anything. So I'm not, that just makes you a volunteer, really. But I got hired. I started off writing news articles, eventually worked my way into reviews, where they put me through a trial by fire by giving me some of the worst games.
Oh, yes.
And at RP Gamer, we have this little slogan that you have to complete the games before you review them. I'm always plugging RP Gamer because if you go to a website, some of these bigger name websites, I won't mention them, a lot of them, they don't actually even play the games to completion before they review them. And that's really important with RPGs because you can have a lot of unbalancing of stuff that's happening in the last 1/2, 1/3, 1/4 of the game. So if someone doesn't play it all the way through, I won't say that a lot of games get better in the last half, but a lot of them get a hell of a lot worse. So it's important you play them all the way through if you're reviewing a game for a website. And that's what RP Gamer does. And it's run by people, no one's paid, so everyone's doing it out of the passion and love, for the games. But anywho, I did reviews for about a year, and I was looking to get into podcasting. They already had like a current events, current news podcast there with the RPG Cast, which has been running for ages, well over a decade. And I talked to the editor-in-chief, Mr. Michael Cunningham, about some ideas, and he said they'll sound good, but we have this old podcast, the RPG Backtrack, and some friends and I did it for RP Gamer. We did about 10 episodes, but then the group kind of fell apart. Real life, kicked in. But I thought it was, he said, I really love the idea because we basically went through old games, and you're always talking about old games, Phil. That's clearly a passion of yours. So, what do you think of this idea? And the more he talked about it, I was like, this sounds very exciting. And we started talking about it in the chat channel that we had at the time. Mike Minky raised his hand. Mike Meeky plays a lot of old games on older consoles, and we ended up hooking up as the co-host and starting it with episode 11. So if you go into iTunes or your podcast catcher, you look up RPG Backtrack, for the first 9 or 10 episodes, it was the old crew. And then Mike Minky and I, about a year after they took a break, picked up the banner, the torch at episode 10 or 11, where I think we started off with the biggie. We started off with Final Fantasy VII, if I'm not mistaken. And we've been doing it ever since. We're around 220-ish now. We record once or twice a month, sometimes taking a break for real life. I've been taking a break lately just because of my job and what's going on with recent events. But we always go back to it and we keep it going. And they're really long episodes. So while we don't record very frequently, when we do get to the mic, they're really, really juicy. And we have a lot of people from RP Gamer come on the show. If it was just Mike and I don't think we could carry it, because we go into these games, we go into a ton of details. So you really had to have played them recently or have a really good memory. So it helps that we're able to pull on the expertise of these experts and these other lovers of RPGs from the RP Gamer staff pool, and they'll come on there and they'll fill in a lot of the blanks that Mike and I don't have. But yeah, it's exciting. It's fun. If you are into retro games, it's been great. And that's what I've been doing now for 8 or 9 years for the site. I'll still write the occasional review. I did do a recent review for Monster Hunter Iceborne, for example. So that's
Excellent.
it. That's the story.
All right.
So, what was your first RPG, and besides that, what was your first Dragon Quest game?
My first RPG was the Gold Box Dungeon Dragons games on the Commodore 64 computer. So we're going like way back, and they were just mind blowing. So my first, if you have never seen them before, do some Googling. The Gold Box Dungeon Dragons games from the mid to late 1980s are some very, very faithful recreations of the tabletop experience, especially, for their time, and even do a better job than some of the newer games do of trying to recreate the tabletop experience. But anyways, then my first Dragon Quest game was Dragon Quest IV, which we'll talk more about later. I don't want to spoil that, my feelings on that. But yes, Dragon Quest IV was, in fact, my first Dragon Quest game.
Okay.
Let's see. What were some of your first impressions of the Dragon Quest series, coming from a PC gamer?
See, that you're going to spoil it. See, that's what okay, fine.
We can save that if you want. We can save your impressions.
You've opened up the can, so
they just gave me the question to ask. I'm sorry.
You done
There's
opened up the
there's a guy with a
six-pack.
gun to Zachary's head. And he's like, read the question.
So you got to understand, the Gold Box Dungeon Dragons games I mentioned was a very faithful representation of the tabletop experience. You literally had a grid when you got into combat where you had a party of 6 characters that you made yourself. And you had to strategically look over these deep and complicated rules, first of all, and come up with what was a balanced team, which wasn't easy. Like in Final Fantasy I, making a balanced team simply made picking warrior, rogue, white mage, and black mage. Boom, balanced party. You didn't waste any thought on it. With Dungeons & Dragons, you really had to pay attention to not only what your party was, what was creating your party as far as how many warriors, how many clerics, whatever, but their race and combinations, what spells they took for your wizards, and how all this was going to interact together. It was a really deep experience. And then I played Dragon Quest IV, where at first it was really cool because you went through the first 5 chapters playing each of the characters' stories. And compared to the Gold Box games, which pretty much are you're creating heroes, and because they're created characters, especially with the limitations, the data limitations of the time, they couldn't get very creative with how your character fit into the story. It was always very, very generic. There was this exciting epic adventure, these dragons needed to be slayed and whatever have you, but you knew nothing of your character aside what you created in your head. Kind of like XCOM nowadays. The excitement is in the fact that you create a party, you name them after your friends, and when they die, it means something because it was named after your friends. Whereas with Dragon Quest, they've already made up the characters and they've got backstories, and you're playing through the backstories, and that was different. That was eye-opening. That was like you're playing through a book. And they've already written the story for you, and you're just experiencing it as you go along. And that was different and original and really cool. Then I got to chapter 5, where you played the main hero, and eventually he or she goes and picks up the other warriors that you played through the first 4 chapters, have these cool backstories. And 2 problems happened here. Number 1, they didn't really continue those stories very well, and those characters became kind of silent, and so a lot of that momentum and excitement really went away really quickly. And number two, the computer controlled them in combat. The combat system is already simplistic compared to the Dungeons & Dragons games because it's not tactical. It's just an enemy in front of you, and your 4 characters, and you pick attack or heal or cast a spell. There's not a whole lot of strategy involved there. But now you're taking what little strategy there is away from me because the computer controls the other characters. And sometimes they make some really stupid decisions. So my first impressions, not very good. I played maybe 10 to 12, 15 hours of it, and I quit.
All right. We'll hear more of your impressions when you got to the, the DS remake later on.
Something else happened between, but you asked me what was my first impressions. And
oh.
Didn't want to keep talking forever. I could go on for years, but that's the first impression. There's a second and a third impression, but we'll stick with the first.
All right. So I listening to 120 of your episodes, I always find it, and I jump around. I'll listen to episode 30. I'll listen to episode 170. It's just like, oh hey, look, there's a game. I kind of play roulette with the app and just kind of. Oh yeah, I have not gone straight through it all. But it's funny because I know at one point you were trying to play your way through the series, and it was years worth, and you were trying to get your brother involved and everything. So I know you've played. I know you've played a good deal of it. What are some of your favorite games that you've played in the Dragon Quest series? And have you just played the mainline or any of the spin-offs?
Yeah, I played. So I played Dragon Quest Heroes. Touched a little bit on. I forget that one with the slime. The Rocket Slime or whatever. Yeah, yeah. Didn't really capture me in the way it's captured other people. But Dragon Quest Heroes and Dragon Quest Heroes 2, sublime. Can't recommend those games enough. Just especially, the first one just, for me, is an appetizer for the second one, but just absolutely amazing games. I love Musou games, and Dragon Quest. Some people will complain that Musou games are very repetitive and they don't require a lot of strategy, which is kind of the point. Like after a stressful day at work, I just want to do 3-button combinations and kill thousands of soldiers, at the same time. And the most difficult thing about your typical Musou game, like a Dynasty Warriors or Samurai Warriors game, or whatever they're called, is being at the right place at the right time, right? That's your biggest concern. But there's, as far as like the action itself, it's pretty simple combinations that make you feel like an epic warrior. Dragon Quest Heroes addresses the concern that these games aren't deep enough and aren't strategic enough because you're playing a party of characters, each with different skills, each with different strengths and weaknesses that have to work together as a party. And they did a really, really great job of capturing like the fact that when you're playing a Dragon Quest game, one of the more difficult Dragon Quest games, and you're going through a boss battle, you have to know to use buffs, debuffs, tension, things like that, and when to use which character where. That they did a really great job of capturing that with the Musou. It was just absolutely amazing. So yeah, I can't recommend that game enough. As far as like mainstream mainline game, I'll still maintain that 4 is my favorite, despite my first impressions. 4 is awesome. Once you get over its limitations, now, granted, I'm really referring to the 3DS version where I can at least control my whole party. And there's some more dialogue, so it's definitely the superior version, in my opinion. But it's just the right length. It tells a good story. It really captures the essence of what makes all the Dragon Quest games awesome, and it doesn't overstay its welcome. Not to say there aren't other great ones. I could go on and on, but 4 is still my favorite. It just hits that sweet spot.
And that's why you're here tonight.
Mm-hmm.
The length of the game can definitely make a difference too. That's for sure.
Yeah, you can have a great game if it overstays its welcome. I talk about that with Persona 3 versus 4. 4 is a lot of people's favorites, but for me, it overstayed its welcome. It was like almost twice as long as Persona 3, and while it does do things better and bring some better things to the table, it doesn't justify, in my opinion, the length of time it took up. I felt like it could have been 24 hours shorter, and it would have been great.
Have you been playing Persona 5 Royal?
It's coming. This is the year of Persona 5. This is totally the year of Persona 5. I got it in the mail about a week or so ago because of my job and, again, chaos and all kinds of stuff I won't bore you guys with. It's been hard to get free time for the last couple of weeks. but that will settle down and it's ready to be open. I'm hoping this weekend I'm going to really be able to get into it and get the year of Persona 5 officially kicked off and started.
As it the year Persona 5, because that's how long it's going to take to beat it?
Well, it's because, yeah, I know, right? We'll see if it overstays its welcome. It's funny because looking at some reviews and talking to a friend who's been laid off, unfortunately, but it has a ton of time to play through this. It seems like while it is very long, that they have done a whole bunch of tweaking, additions, just a ton of improvements to what was already a really good game, turning it into what many are calling a masterpiece. I'll be the judge when I play it. This isn't the Persona 5 podcast, so I won't, go on. But we'll kind of see. But no, the reason why it's the year of 5 is you not only have Persona 5 Golden, which yes will take a beefy amount of time, but you also have Persona 5 Scramble coming out later this year, which is a continuation of the Persona 5 story, and happens to be a Muso game. And I know a lot of people aren't excited, but I am super excited about that.
I'm excited for that one. I really need to get on. I gotta get on 5 though first.
Right, and I'm throwing in Persona Q2. I never played Persona Q2. I played Persona Q, which was okay. Persona Q, if you don't know, is a marriage of Persona 3 and 4 with the Etrian Odyssey series. You can get that on your 3DS. It's a dungeon crawling experience, but it features characters and a story that feels like you can fit in with the Persona universe just fine, but it pulls those characters in and they meet together. And it's a pretty good game. If you like Etrian Odyssey or like Persona, I love Persona Q. It's just a really fun experience. But by all accounts from reviewers, including my good friend Mike Minky, everyone who's played it, Persona Q2, which also introduces characters from Persona 5, it's a Persona 5 centric experience. It really focuses on that story, and the Persona 3-4 characters are there, but they're a little bit more of a backseat. But as far as games go, they say that this improves on that as well. So I figured I have it, but I didn't want to play it until playing Persona 5. And when I heard Royal was coming, I'm like, why play Persona 5 when I can have the better experience? So this is year of Persona 5 because it will definitely take me at the very least until the end of this year to play all 3 of those games. And more than likely it will spill into 2021, let's be honest.
Yeah, especially when you get the dancing game going.
We're not doing the dancing. That's not part of it. That's not a thing. No. You ever see White Man Can't Dance? I will knock over the furniture. I know it's just on the controller. I'll still knock it all over. It doesn't end well.
So, any games in the DQ franchise that you haven't gotten around to playing yet that you want to?
Dragon Quest 11. I got the Switch. I got it on the PlayStation, and I never really got around to it. I bought it. I want to support them. And I wanted to play it, but I just never really got to it. And now they had announced the Switch edition. And normally I wouldn't go to a Switch edition of anything when I have it on the PlayStation, because generally speaking, your PlayStation versions of games are always going to have the better graphics, the better frame rates, the better experience, unless you're solely focused on portable, which I'm not. But as maybe you guys have talked about in the past, the Switch edition has a number of goodies. The 2D old school mode that was featured in the Japanese 3DS version or whatever it was. So that's super exciting. But the most exciting thing of all is real orchestrated music for whatever gosh darn reason, and I really don't care. But on the PlayStation 4 version, we have digitized music. And on the Switch, we have the digitized music. And if you haven't stopped and listened to the difference between the two of those, it's night and day. And when it goes dun 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 dun, you want that played with real trumpets. You don't want a digitized version of that. You want trumpets blaring the fact you just leveled up, and that's what the Switch version does. So aside from the additional goodies and tweaks and stuff that they've added in, it's essentially the Royal version of Dragon Quest XI. So if you have both, I would recommend this is one of those rare instances where I recommend Switch edition over a PlayStation edition for those people who have both. So yeah, that's the one I haven't played. Now I haven't completed 7 or 8. I have both of those on the 3DS. I go back to them from time to time. 7 is just I'm sorry, it's a slog. It's a slog.
That was the first podcast I ever did with you, was talking about 7, and I had to be the Dragon Quest 7 apologist on that episode.
So much thick blood. The
thing is, I think every time there was a complaint, I was like, that's a perfectly valid complaint, but I still love it. Yeah. I had no facts. I had no facts to back up my love of it, because yes,
You know what? The complaints against your typical Dynasty Warriors games are completely valid. It is repetitive. The graphics are, low res outside of the Warriors themselves. Everything else in that game is low res. I could go on and on, but I still love it. It's great, so I totally get that. 8, I don't really have a great excuse for 8 aside from the fact that it's on my 3DS, and I just don't spend a lot of time on my 3DS, so I need to finish that. I'm like maybe halfway through, maybe.
Okay. Do you have any favorite or least favorite characters from the series?
Oh, favorite characters. Wow, that's a good one. That assumes I'm actually good with names.
Just say Yangus and you'll get bonus points.
Yeah. Yangus is really I will say that the beauty of Dragon Quest VIII is voice acting, and no one shines better than Yangus. He is super memorable because of that and whatnot. And I don't know why. I think Alina's very feisty, so I really like her. And playing her in Dragon Quest Heroes 2, where she just beats the crap out of everybody, just beats them with her fist, is just hilarious. So there you go. I'm not going to say Carver, that's for sure.
Oh gosh. Ugh. I was staring at him the other day because I was laying out all my perler bead creations, and I was taking pictures of them in sequence, and then I came to my Dragon Quest VI ones, and I was like, oh god, these fools.
Oh yes, Matt's favorite game.
One day Liam's going to have me do a podcast on that, and I'll be very quiet.
Yeah, we almost got one recently.
Yeah, we were close to snagging someone for that one.
Yeah.
Saloon's really cool because he works smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty fun chapter.
All right, so favorite mechanics in any of the Dragon Quest games. What do you like in your Dragon Quest games? Obviously, you mentioned the Muso games, but is there anything that you've... any parts of any of the other games that you played you like monster collecting or the job classes, casinos, anything specific?
It's interesting. Like the combat system in Dragon Quest games really haven't changed a whole lot over the years. No. They done, unlike Final Fantasy, they stuck with the formula. And honestly, I think that's what really works really well is... I'm not a fan of the typical turn-based JRPG formula, the traditional formula, because it feels like to me there's no strategy to it. It's attack, attack, heal, attack, attack, heal. And early Dragon Quest games certainly, pretty much boil down, to that, and you get repetitive pretty quickly. But what Dragon Quest has really done really well that other JRPGs can't do is every time it comes up with the Dragon Quest game, they refine that formula, make sure it's super, super balanced. And it's become more and more, balanced, I think, as time goes along, more or less. So, when you're getting in there, you're getting a really tight experience that if you're not over leveling, you're going to have to pay attention to the combats. But at the same time, if you decide you want to an easier experience, you can grind for a bit and over level, and you can have an easier experience. If you want a harder experience, you can push forward and push past where you probably should be at, and you'll have a harder time for it. That is something that we take for granted in RPGs, especially JRPGs. But the reality is that a lot of games can't get that balance right, and they're either too easy or too hard, especially in the second half, just because there hasn't been enough playtesting and number crunching and things like that. But Dragon Quest has had the advantage of sticking with the same system for decades. The graphics have gotten better. The sound has gotten better. Now you do have class, you do have class, and if you changing and things like that. If you're saying, if the question is something along the lines of what's your favorite mechanic within the quest in a vacuum, or within the series in a vacuum, I would definitely agree that the class changing systems are always fun. The fact that you're going from generation to generation in Dragon Quest V, I think was super exciting. The casinos are a fun distraction, but they're not really. But I feel like with a lot of those minor sets, the pet collecting and some of those, I really think other games do it better. Like any one of those elements, if you're looking outside of Dragon Quest universe, other games have done those other elements, better. If you want a great monster collecting game that does it really well, there's Pokemon or some of its competitors that do that really well, for example, or class changing. You have Final Fantasy Tactics and Final Fantasy V that arguably do that better. But but no one, I think, gets the true turn-based JRPG formula down the way Dragon Quest does. And that's what's so sublime about it. When you get into a boss encounter with Dragon Quest, you know you need to be on your A game.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and then if you do add into some mechanics like class changing or stuff, that's going to add some extra wrinkles and some extra strategy to what you got to bring to the table for that boss fight. So that's even more exciting. I've heard some really good things about Dragon Quest XI that they really have brought that home. So I can't wait to give that a shot.
Yeah, when you were talking about boss fights, that's actually one of the first things that I thought of was some of the boss fights that you encounter in 11 are really pretty memorable. Okay, so do you have any favorite DQ merchandise?
DQ merchandise? You mean outside of the games themselves?
Yeah, outside of the games
There's
themselves,
something other than the games themselves?
Yeah.
No, actually, I guess I'm not really a big merchandise person. I've got some let me take a look at my wall here.
Maybe plug Slime Time T-shirts, Platy. What do you think?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's my answer. Slime Time T-shirts, by far my favorite piece of Dragon Quest merchandise. Buy yours today at, what's the website? Is it slimetime.com?
Just send the money to Dwayne Bullock. He'll get you the T-shirt.
Trying to give you guys a plug here.
We'll insert that into the show notes.
No.
If we have.
We do.
All
I
right.
think we do have Slime Time T-shirts, though. I think we would just hook this up with that.
I think, obviously there's a ton of merchandise that's out there. It's just, I got so, when you get, you're older like I am, obviously I've been around the block, for a while, I haven't played the gold box games and stuff. We really don't, you try to minimize shit in your life and just having this many games that I already have, it's already takes up enough space. So
Yeah, I mean, not me. I got boxed merch at my parents' place, like up in Cape Cod and in storage and everything. So
I tell you what, though. Guys. I am a fan of like the action figures, and I've got like Final Fantasy, action figures of like Lightning and stuff. I've got Persona, action figures. I bought Joker for the year Persona 5, and what I do is I put them on the corner of my desk. So every year I buy a new action figure. For the year The Witcher was Geralt, and I sit at the corner of my work desk. So people come in and say, "What's that?" And I explain to them it's the year of Witcher, and I'm playing the Witcher games or whatever. That never happened. But I got Joker this year. People come and see Joker. What's that about? I tell them about Persona 5. There is a possibility that next year might be a year of Dragon Quest for me. We'll see. Not committing to it yet, but it might be.
There's a lot of what is it? The play arts or
you'd have to save up for that. It might take you a year anyway.
So
a lot of them coming out.
I usually have a budget every year of about $100 for these things. So
that's about what they would cost.
You could get one.
I get one. It's like a little early birthday present for myself. I get one and it sits on my desk all year, and then it goes into the cupboard or given to a friend. But so here's my challenge to everybody. I have a Twitter handle at JCServant. It's pretty much spelled the way it sounds. And if you have a favorite figure that it needs to be something that I can actually go and buy, preferably on Amazon. I've done some purchases from eBay before, so that's not completely out of the question. But I won't buy cheap Chinese knockoffs. I won't do that. So it needs to be an original manufacturer, real thing. But if you got some suggestions, tweet me at JCServant, and if I pick yours, I'll send you a free game. GOG or Steam, because I've got a number of gift games there I need to give away. Look at that! Instant contest right here on Slime Time.
There you go.
Yeah.
Wow! We just did that. It's totally a thing. You don't even know what game you're gonna get. Whatever's left on my gift account.
There you go. All right. Well, now that we've talked a bit about Dragon Quest, and we'll talk Quest 4 in a second. But for one last question for you, Phil, what are some of your other favorite RPG games or series besides Dragon Quest?
I like the Final Fantasy series, at least up to a point. I'm not the hugest fan of the more modern games in the series, but up through 12. I had a really good time with those, and I'll have a couple of those action figures behind me, so that's a really good series. Thinking for a second here, series. Oh, Duh. Monster Hunter, which really isn't your typical
You love that.
Do love some Monster Hunter. And it's one of those games, it's more of an action style RPG. And I use that in air quotes because I guess it can be argued whether or not it's an RPG. But we cover it RP Gamer, so it must be an RPG. But it's a lot of fun going out and hunting monsters. It's a little hard to get into. I had to go to some YouTube videos and learn just how the freaking game works. That's a lot to ask of anybody who's coming to play a game, but I can't stress this enough. If you once you get to know it, you'll love it. And in a way, it does feel like an RPG to me because there is that similar mechanic I just talked about with Dragon Quest, where as you're moving up through the monster list, if you want a harder experience, just push faster. The game doesn't stop you from working your way through the missions and quickly getting to the harder missions, even though you're not geared for it, which means you'll have a harder experience. And if you're good at action games, you'll do fine. But if you're like me and your reflexes aren't so great, you can take your time. You can grind up different armor sets and different weapons so that you have the best tools for the next monster that's on your docket to progress. And I think that sense of progression that comes from a combination of your skill and your ability to think strategically and grind up like you do in an RPG is really what I find satisfying about that series. Much more so than, let's say, a Dark Souls. I know some people compare Monster Hunter to Dark Souls or whatever it's called. I'm not a big fan of Dark Souls because I feel like while there is some RPG mechanics there, ultimately, when it comes to the tougher bosses in that game, you get hit twice. It doesn't matter what armor you're wearing, you're dead. Like those games are just so balls to the wall hard. Whereas in Monster Hunter, you can take the time, you can prepare, you can get the right traps, bring the right tools, bring the right equipment, wear the right armor, and you'll have a much easier time dealing with the monster. So really love the Monster Hunter series. And Castlevania. I haven't talked about Castlevania in a while, but man, those are some of the best Metroidvania games. Metroidvanias are really cool and awesome now. People need to go back and play some of the old ones, like Order of Ecclesia, one of the original games I reviewed for RP Gamer. Super fun. Go play it today.
I gotta give a shout out to Matt Kraft, one of our former guests. I was sitting at dinner about a month ago, and I got an all caps text from him. He's like, "Oh my God, I can't even remember what it is now. It's on my phone." But what was it?
Symphony of the Night.
Yeah, he's like, Symphony of the Night just came out it's on my phone. And Matt Kraft loves his phone games. He's Mr. Mobile Gamer. Not necessarily mobile games, but he loves to play games on his mobile device. And I'm sitting at dinner and I was like, oh, I've not played that one. Next thing I know, I got $3 sent to me through the Facebook Messenger, which I never had anybody do. I was like, what do I? So I was like, why did you just send me $3? He's like, you got to buy it right now. Go to the Google Play Store. It's there.
Oh, jeez. Oh, my gosh.
Did you buy it or did you just pocket the $3?
I actually bought it. But I think it that might make its way to my modded Vita instead. I think I need some buttons for that game.
I can't recommend Symphony of the Night enough, especially if you're a retro gamer. I feel like that's like a 101 class. Like you have to take that to even call yourself a retro gamer. But don't play. I mean, don't use cell phone experience unless you got a really good joystick. Yeah, that's not the ideal way to play that classic.
I did Matt Kraft a solid, and I bought it on the Google Play Store, but and it's downloaded. It's on my phone. Sorry, Matt Kraft, haven't clicked on it yet, but yeah, I think I'll get to that on something with buttons. All right, well, we have now reached the part of the episode where we're actually going to talk about Dragon Quest IV some more. Not that Phil hasn't told us his initial impressions about it, but we kind of baited him into that one, so oops, that's on us. So I'll talk here for just a couple minutes, kind of give a big rundown. Phil, we don't get too diving deep into the whole plot. We don't go super deep about what every little bit is. What we like to do is really just tell our impressions of all the different stuff. So, I start out with a 2-minute, Cliff's Notes, Platty's Notes version of the plot. Then we just get to talk about all the fun stuff that we remember about it and our favorite parts. So, Dragon Quest IV is set up differently than any of the other Dragon Quest games in that it's got a chapter-based system. And it's a little interesting because when you start the game, you start as the main player, but it opens with you're living your life in a little mountain village, and suddenly monsters attack, and things happen, and boom, that's the end. I am remembering this right, guys, right?
No, well, in the original, it starts immediately with Chapter 1 with Ragnar, and you don't actually play as the hero/heroine until Chapter 5. But in the remakes, they added in a prologue where you get to see the hero/heroine training with their mentor. You get a little tour of their village, meet one of their close friends, and then you hear a brief snippet from the parents of the hero/heroine saying that, well, you have a destiny, but we won't worry about telling you about that tonight. Let's just enjoy the evening. But then what you were talking about, Matt, that happens once you start at Chapter 5.
Okay, so see because I think the last 3 times I've played this, it's been DS, and mobile, which is basically a port of the DS. So that's why I'm thinking it opens with the hero. But okay, so opens with Chapter 1, and you're this pink-clad, awesomely mustached guy named Ragnar, and you play just a little 2 to 3 hour basic RPG kind of. You got to find out what's happening to the children of the your empire that you're in, and you get a little heel slime Healy as a friend.
That's a Dragon Quest first right there, monster recruitment.
It is. That was the very first monster that joins you in the games. Good point there. So that happens. You play a couple hours, and then the chapter ends. Ragnar kind of takes off. He's like, there's something bad going on in the world. Maybe I better go figure out what's going on. So second chapter opens up, and you're this teenage princess. In the more modern translations, she's a Tsarina because they got all the Russian accents, and she's part of that.
Well, in Heroes, she's Zarevna, right?
Yeah, it's Tsarevna Elena. That's her full title.
Okay. But I don't know the exact, the true pronunciation. If it's Zarina Elena, if it's supposed to be like that kind of rhyming sound, I get that.
I wouldn't put that past what they thought about.
My Russian's a little rusty.
I don't know. I think that how they pronounce it in Dragon Quest Heroes might be the right way, because I know they kind of joke with the accents and make them a little more comedic, probably, but I would imagine that the way they say Tsarevna is probably the right way of saying it, or close enough to it.
And I'm probably butchering it by just trying to rhyme it, so. But, yeah, you get another 2 to 3 hour snippet. It's not even that long, probably. But I think this one's one of the longer one. But you get a little 2 to 3 hour snippet of an RPG where she's going on an adventure. She's sick of just sitting at home all the time, and she's got her loyal, the mage. Oh, what's his name?
You have Boria, who's the court mage of the kingdom, and Kirill, who's the priest.
Platy, isn't he your favorite character?
Kirill is my favorite. No, the Boria is the one I was thinking of first.
Oh, okay.
No. Kirill, Christo, he's my hero. He's the original Dragon Quest paladin. He's not just a priest. He's a paladin, because, man, he can equip some awesome swords later on.
Yeah.
So,
and he's pining too.
He is, yeah. He's kind of following after her like a lovesick puppy.
Even in the first the NES version, you can find his love letter to her in the library in the.
And as you play the later versions with the chat, and if you play the Dragon Quest Heroes, he's head over heels. So you got that little game, and then that ends. She ends up in the town of Endor. She's doing this tournament, and she goes to fight Psaro the Manslayer, who's supposed to be who she's supposed to battle, and suddenly he's not there. So kind of end of chapter 2. Chapter 3 begins. This one's pretty awesome. You're the merchant Taloon, and he was translated as Torneko, and now he's officially like Torneko Taloon. So they just threw both those names at him, and it's cool. You get to run a little store for a while, and the whole point of that couple hour snippet is make money. You make 65,000 gold to build a tunnel to get away from Endor to the next continent, and that ends. So chapter 4 begins, and you're playing as a pair of sisters that are dancers and fortune tellers, trying to figure out what happened to Dad, who died, who was killed. They want to get revenge on the bad king that did that, and you play through that chapter, and when you can't really do that, that chapter ends. And then chapter 5 suddenly begins, and that's the main game. You start out as a hero, as I mistakenly said before. You're in the little town. Monsters attack your town. You're the only survivor. And you start making your way through the world, and you find all those characters that you've been playing with in the reverse order you play them with. The first people you come across, you go to the town of Endor, which has pretty much appeared in most of the other chapters. And there's the sisters. The one reads your fortune and like, oh my God, you're the hero we've been looking for. We've been just wandering around for a while. And she gets her sister from the casino, and they join you. And then you find Taloon at one point, because he's got a ship, then you need a ship to travel the world, and then you're finding some seeds to grow, or you're trying to find the herbs to heal a town, and you meet Kirill and Boria and Alina along the way, and you pick up Ragnar later on, and you go on the typical travel the world, solve problems in towns, beat the big bad guy at the end kind of adventure that Dragon Quests always end up being. But yeah, it's definitely got that different feel at the beginning, because you don't start out playing the hero. You get a little bit of time, and Phil talked about it earlier, you get a little bit of time to know all those characters. And yeah, on the NES game, after you start Chapter 5, it's all about being the hero. The hero's the only one that you can control, and everybody else was just, you could set the AI level to it, but you couldn't take full control of your party anymore, which was definitely annoying looking back at it. Once it moved to the DS and the 3DS and mobile and everything, nowadays you can control everybody in Chapter 5 and do things to your heart content. It was the first Dragon Quest game to have the wagon traveling behind you, and you can take out players in and out of the wagon during battles. But, alright, so that's kind of what Dragon Quest IV is about. So let's talk about some of our favorite parts and our favorite experiences with it. We'll start with you, Phil. Who are your favorite characters here for Dragon Quest IV?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, Alita's really cool, and her story of kind of rebelling while I think his name was Breya or whatever, the old guy. And I'm really terrible with names. That's why
in the NES version he was Bray. Yep, he was
Bray in the original.
Boria.
Yeah, and the cleric, what was his name?
He was Christo, and now he's Kirill.
Of course, why not? Let's change everyone's name. It's fine. But regardless, and the fact that they were always all the time trying to watch over her and protect her, but supportive at the same time, I felt that was a really cute story. But let's be honest. I mean, Taloon was what he was, I think, in the day. Now he's what, Tornico or something like that.
Yeah, it's Tornico Taloon now for his full name.
Yeah. I mean, that was obviously a really cool and different take, especially for those times, like, just came out of left field. The idea that you're playing a merchant, and a lot of the quests there were focused on you increasing your wealth by making some really good trades, or going out and getting materials or weapons from the monsters and then selling them. That was very original, very fun. The fact that he woke up every day and his wife's there with a sandwich and stuff, and say, have a good day at work. Right. And a lot of RPGs, especially JRPGs, focus on these young 15-year-olds who end up having to save the world for reasons. And this is a guy who's overweight and just trying to get through life, but he manages to break the glass ceiling and become rich. And that's something I can relate to. Like, that, I can relate to how his day and how the whole chapter begins, because that's my life. I'm an older guy, so that's really cool. But then to see, of course, the fantasy part of that is he became, rich by the end, and makes really big things happen because of his savvy business skills that I wish I had.
Well, Phil, you just need to get into dealing arms merchanting.
There you go. I'm gonna start buying some tanks. There you go. That's the key to victory. Buying and selling tanks. Who wants a tank? I got tanks.
Zachary, who did you like?
For Dragon Quest IV, one of my favorite characters is Ragnar, because I've always sort of liked the warrior, like the tough guy of the party, so I thought it was interesting playing as him the first time I played that game, since it's just a lone warrior by himself, and normally, you might have a healer with you, or you might have somebody to back you up, and you don't get healing for a little while, actually, so at least with Ragnar by himself, he can still, put up a fight, and as long as you have some medical herbs, he's fine. But what I like about Ragnar is, for one, I like his just sort of ridiculous but cool design, where he's got the big bushy mustache. He's got like the pink armor, but for some reason he's wearing shorts underneath. Like, instead of leg armor, he's wearing like shorts, like blue shorts or something. He's got the most ridiculous look to him. But honestly, he's kind of a badass character, and you can see that too if you ever see like any of the Japanese footage of Dragon Quest Heroes 2 from the Switch version, because they did add him into that one, and sort of seeing what he can do in action in that game, and just how much of a fight he can put up. It's like, that's the guy who I imagined when I first was seeing this game. A guy who doesn't need any powers or abilities. He's just a man on a mission to defend this hero, and he's from the party chat that I have seen in the mobile version, he does seem like a pretty caring person, a little gruff on the outside, but when you look at his appearance and see his design, you can kind of get that impression from him. Another character I really like, as Phil was talking about, I really like Torneko Taloon because I enjoy how different his chapter is, but I also just kind of like that character. I've always sort of liked characters who kind of break the mold in an RPG a little bit, so like in Torneko's case, he definitely is, because you don't normally see someone who's a bigger heavyset guy. He's has a family. He's one of your main characters. Usually, that's just like a major NPC or something. And Torneko is a fun character to use too. Like in his chapter, you fully control him, and in the remake / in the original, I think it is once he joins you in Chapter 5, he becomes more of a mixture of like the merchant and gadabout class, where he will do some random actions sometimes. But at the same time, those random actions in combat can be helpful, because I had one playthrough where he just constantly was stealing all these Falcon Knife earrings from later enemy encounters in the game, like when you're trying to go to the Demon Lord's castle on the overworld before you head to the Zenith castle. And in so many battles, he kept stealing all this rare stuff. In one boss fight, I think it was the Rose Guardian, when you're trying to meet Rose, he ended up stealing a Sphere of Silence from that Rose Guardian boss, which was pretty surprising he did that. So from a writing / character point, I really like him, but from battle and combat, yeah, there's times where he doesn't do what you want him to do, but I just love the guy so much, because sometimes those random actions he can do just it's so great. He's just such a real life to the party, to be honest. And I know he's sort of one character that people are like, don't use him, you can't control him. But I say you got to go for it and use him. He can do random stuff, and it can really benefit the party in the long run. And then there's times where he completely screws you over, and you run into trouble, because it's like, I needed you to heal that turn. Why didn't you heal that turn?
Yeah,
All right, so Liam.
Well, I always like to load up Torneko with the cautery swords. You can find like it's like a 1 in 20 or 1 in 30 shot that someone will come into the store and try to sell you a cautery sword, and that's like a really good sword for early on in the game. So it's great to just load those up. Don't sell them to someone when they come in, and then just like save up money, and then just buy it repeatedly from your boss, and then you can just load that up, and then he'll carry them to the next chapter. So whereas gold won't pass between chapters, you can now just have like a ton of these swords and just give them to like anyone who can equip them in the future in Chapter 5, or just sell them for a bunch of money.
Yeah, that's right, because as you said, items, even in the NES version, the items, whatever you had in your inventory, would carry over to Chapter 5.
Yeah. Yeah, there's other little tricks like that, like the safe. If you don't get the safe in Torneko's chapter, it's there in Chapter 5, and you can like go get it. And if you got it in 3, then it's gone after 3.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of cool tricks like that. I love Torneko's chapter, but my favorite chapters and favorite character is Elena from Chapter 2. She's just so incredibly badass, and she can just kind of tear through things with like her bare hands or her claws or whatever. I just really like that chapter. Of course, my favorite walking theme in the game is still Ragnar's chapter 1.
Oh yeah, that's a good song.
Yeah, and you only get it for a short time, but I think there's a way when you're in Chapter 5, if you switch the main character or you switch one of the characters out to a certain slot, it changes the battle music back to that chapter.
Yeah, it's the first character slot, Liam. If you put Ragnar into the character 1 slot when you have the full party, it'll turn back to his theme.
Yeah, that's cool. I always like that. But so Elena's
Never knew that.
It's kind of one of those tricks that the game doesn't really tell you about. It's kind of more of an Easter egg, because I mean, once you do get that full party assembled and you finally leave the castle with Ragnar in tow, now that he's the last party member, you get that real epic overworld theme Wagon's Wheel March that kicks in. Yeah. But then if you would decide like, hey, I want to hear like Elena's theme, or I want to hear Torneko's theme, if you throw them at the front of the party, the game's like, hey, you got this character up there, we're going to change the music up a bit for you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Phil that this is my favorite Dragon Quest game, and just for the sheer nostalgia of playing it when I was 11 years old for the first time in like 1991 or 2, whenever it came out. I think 92, right?
It was way back in the day. I got it for like a birthday My mom just goes out. She doesn't know what games to get me. I got some of the most random games, and that was one of them. But I don't know when we're going to talk about second and third impressions, so I'll wait for second, third impression.
Yeah, I never got any good games. My parents were not good at buying video games, so I would get like X-Men for NES, which was terrible, and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, like things that you would think would be good, but they just made terrible games for.
Oh, you got E.T., didn't you?
I did get E.T., yes.
Oh my god!
I'm not kidding. I own that, yeah.
He called it.
No, I do
I totally said that as
yeah.
a joke.
I do have E.T. for Atari. It's one of the ones that didn't make it into the landfill.
Precious coming up.
That game was so epic. You just had to keep running around and dodging those holes.
Yeah, and
they
then
were
when you fall
everywhere.
into it, you just raise your neck up and he just kind of floats up slowly.
Yeah.
You try to
So
build the
epic.
clock, and then the
Yeah.
game starts over and you have to do it again, and that's it. There's no ending.
So epic.
Sorry.
And
Sorry
you're
for
greeted by
spoilers.
that creepy looking face of his on the title
Sorry for-
screen. He
Yeah,
stares at you.
Sorry for the ET spoilers.
Well, I'll get my favorite character, and then we can get into some of the other part there. Liam spoiled it earlier. I love Christo. I know now Kirill. I got to keep calling him Christo. I grew up with him. Yeah, like Liam, you said, this is definitely old school Dragon Quest. This is my favorite, like of the first four by far, because honestly, I didn't get many SNES RPGs when I went off to college. I had my NES and I had this game, and that was pretty much the only RPG I had. And it was the only Dragon Quest game we got for like 10 years almost. So I think 9 or 10 years until Dragon Quest VII came out. So this was like the only one. And I didn't discover emulation of 5 and 6 until right around 2000.
I think the Game Boy Color remakes of 1 through 3 came out before.
Yeah, but
yeah,
so,
you're right. It
that
was a
wasn't as
long
much
time.
fun as this.
It was a really
So,
long
yeah, I mean, it was a long time of like, hey, if I'm going to pull out an RPG, it's going to be this or the original Final Fantasy, pretty much, for my NES. And yeah, Christo, I never had that problem. You know, Dragon Quest Heroes makes fun of him, and apparently Dragon Quest of the Stars is now too. That the AI was kind of broken with him. And I was talking about this on Phil's podcast when we were talking about the Muso games, and I'll have to talk about that again. That his special attack in Dragon Quest Heroes is he's trying to cast thwack, 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 thwack.
Thwack.
Yep, and it keeps failing because one of the AI problems that the NES version had was he would try to cast thwack, and he'd try to cast thwack on bosses and like metal enemies, and you're like, you just know that's not going to work.
What is it that he says at the end of the coup? He's like, "Be gone away."
Yeah, he yells "Begone away." Yeah.
Be gone away. Oh man.
But like I don't know. I was very good at setting my AI, and I never had that problem with him. He attacked well with swords, and he healed, and he cast at the time it was by kill, now it's oomph. He had that spell, so that doubled everybody's attack power, and just I loved him. He was always my favorite character. Talon, he's awesome too, and yeah, Ragnar is an awesome design, and Alina's kick-ass. But Christo, definitely number one in my heart there. So, favorite chapters. Since this is a chapter-based game, I think we've all kind of almost shared this a little bit already. But Phil, what was out of your 4 intro chapters? Which one was your favorite?
Tulu was definitely the most creative. Yeah, it was just. I mean, the other ones were really cute and really awesome. And Maya Mina, whatever. I mean, all of them were good. They were just so good. And it's like I don't know of too many games that have done that since then. I'm like racking my brain of any other game that really does a great job when you have a party. You have plenty, countless JRPGs that came out afterwards that has a party, that has the typical stereotypical hero goes around and collects other people to join him on a crusade, and it gives them a little bit of an introduction. But this idea that you actually play these other characters up for an hour, 2 or 3, really get their backstory, I just can't emphasize how ahead of that time it was, and in a way still is today. You just don't see that. But definitely, I mean, despite how cool and advanced that mechanic was, Talon's chapter is like it takes that even a step forward and just being so creative. And again, you don't get a lot of games where you're going to play the shopkeeper and be able to do these really cool game breaking, make all this crap ton of money and still somehow not break the entire game experience type of thing. There's some games that kind of play around with the concept, certainly, but this was centered around this one character, and it was just really cool and really neat.
Awesome. Zachary?
Yeah, sort of to echo what Phil was saying, Chapter 3 was my favorite gameplay-wise because it is fun running the shop for a little while, and then you start getting some of the good equipment that comes in. You get the money earned up yourself, you buy said equipment or, the cautery sword, and then you can run around trying to earn more items and armor so you can sell that off. You can help, I forget the name of the kingdom, but it's the one that's just north of Endor, and you have to help them repair their bridge, so you have to help pay for that, and then you have to keep raising money. I just sort of liked how, even though it is a chapter where you have to kind of grind out gold, the pattern and the process for how it is, like the gameplay loop for it, it's a satisfying way to do it, because even though the amount keeps growing and growing, like I think at the end, just before you beat the chapter, like you have to help complete this big long underground tunnel that this old man's trying to dig out, so you can connect the kingdom of Endor to the countries to the east, and you have to pay like 65,000 gold for it. Well, you earn so much armor and so much weapons and like all these other things so quickly that are like they're considered rare items that your wife can sell off for a huge profit because she's somehow able to mark them up and sell them up at a much higher price than what you probably should be buying them at. but it's thanks to them, and it's thanks to that and the other mechanics of that chapter that makes it really enjoyable. Story-wise, I would probably say Chapter 4 is my favorite of those first 4 chapters, because I kind of like that mystery of like the twins Mina and Maya trying to figure out what happened to their dad, what happened to his former student that we knew when we were growing up, what's going on in our part of the world, and you sort of unravel sort of the mysteries, what's going on, and how that particular part, like the Marquis de Leon, you come across how he has connections to the main story, even though he's sort of doing his own thing too. So plot-wise, I would say that was my favorite one of them.
Liam?
Cool. Yeah, I like Chapter 2. Again, with Elena in it, I like that whole tournament and building up to it. I think there's a lot of suspense surrounding, fighting off these battles, and then you're about to fight Sorrow, and then he just doesn't show. And that's I had to wonder. I forget exactly why he was in the tournament in the first place. He was trying to get the amulet of transmutation or something. Was that?
Yeah, there was a prize that he
He
wanted.
steals the prize, or
I can't really remember what happened, why he walked away. Yeah.
all right, yeah, but there's echoes of that in Dragon Quest XI as well. So that whole kind of concept of a tournament, and like the winner of the tournament gets this like prize that you need, kind of thing. And yeah, it's just something that I really like. Just there's enemies that you fight in the tournament you don't see anywhere else in the game, because they're not palette swapped. They're like unique enemies just for the tournament.
Yeah, some of them were like the townspeople because they're humans, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
one's a martial
girl.
artist.
Yep,
Yeah.
a martial artist, buddy girl, and a kid with a boomerang.
And I've got to go with what Phil and Zachary have both said. Like, Chapter 3 was awesome. I would, when I was young, I would sit there for an hour and just run the shop.
Yep, you could. You could just end the game, keep playing the shop.
And, your wife gave you the lunch every day, and you could go then sell the lunch at the shop to make money. And
That's right.
so that was always fun. And yeah, you're all talking cautery swords. I remember it as the Sword of Malice.
Yes, in the original NES.
Yeah, all those swords of malices.
And you get such crap wages from that shop, though. You know that your boss is ripping you off, so you don't actually feel bad when you go back with the final key and just rob him.
Oh yeah, that's right. You can. That's one of the houses you can use that key at. I forgot about that.
All right, so Liam, I see you've got some things about fun facts here. But I know before you get into that, I just want to mention because I think we've touched on it a little bit, there was obviously remakes of this game, and this was the first game to get remade and put on the Nintendo DS. And I remember when that happened, it was right around Thanksgiving, 2008, 2007.
2008.
2008 was when it came out in Japan. And what
No,
was
that-
interesting about
No, 2007 in Japan, 2008 in the
Okay.
US.
So yeah, it was right around Thanksgiving 2007. And at the time, I had my favorite little toy. I had a G6 card that went in my Nintendo DS Lite, and I had a little thing to slot in the GBA slot and the little card to put in, and I could run emulated ROMs on my device for both Game Boy Advance and whatever. And when the Japanese version hit, they had the English text already in there. They had translated 90% of the Japanese, not the party chat. We found out later, but like I got to I got to play it in English because somebody flipped the switch on the ROM and uploaded it to a website. The day it dropped in Japan, I got to play it here in English. So,
Nice.
that was pretty
percentage
cool.
of it was translated? You said like 80%?
Yeah, there were. I mean, it was almost like that Dragon Quest VI fan translation where you'd go somewhere sometimes, or if you said no to the merchant, there would be some gobbledygook there.
Right.
But I mean, all the items, all the story text. I mean, yeah, you'd find a couple things here and there, but I played through it just fine. It was awesome. But that wasn't the only version planned first.
Yeah, I mean, so there was in the back of the manual for Dragon Warrior 7 when that came out in, what was that, 2002, was an advertisement for coming soon, Dragon Warrior 4 for PlayStation, and the entire fan base was like freaking out. They're like, "Oh my god, this is gonna be awesome! This is gonna be the best thing ever!" And then the Heartbeat, the company working on the on translating everything, quit. They basically shuttered their. Was that it? Was it Heartbeat? Anyone else?
I believe you're right on that. Yeah.
I think that they were the Japanese dev team that was that helped make the game over in Japan.
Yeah. So they quit the industry, or they disbanded while they were in the middle of the project, and like the entire fan base was like crushed. I remember being on the original NX forums back in like 2000 to 2002 around, and just everyone was like crushed, and we just had to kind of deal with it. And so like my version of dealing with it was to like buy the Japanese version and play it for 5 minutes and realize, I can't read Japanese and there's no Google Translate because that doesn't exist in 2002. So yeah, and then we just like 6 magical years later, it was out on Nintendo DS.
I mean, do we know if there's really any huge difference between the PlayStation version that Japan got and the DS version?
I think that Immigrant Town was changed slightly with how it worked, because I want to say that, at least from what I've read, that the original PlayStation 1 remake of the game, the Immigrant Town, I think acted a bit more like how Dragon Quest VII's Immigrant Town worked in the PS1 version, where you had to
oh dear God,
trade people, and like it was more random before they changed it to like set places. But I could be totally wrong on that. I might be remembering wrong, but that's at least what is coming to my mind. That's like only the main difference.
Well, they added an extra element for tagging between the DS version that's not in the mobile version because of the DS functionality.
Oh yeah.
Being different.
What's interesting too about that is that when you make your villager that you can use for the tag thing, you have like a bunch of generic NPCs. But then you have one reference to a future Dragon Quest game, Dragon Quest VI, with Carver. He's for some reason one of the options. And then one of the other options, I think, was Florette from Dragon Quest Swords, if I remember right. Because I remember when I was making my NPC for that, even though I had nobody to tag with, I decided to still try and make one. I looked through and I remember the last two being characters I didn't recognize, and luckily when 6 came out a few years later, it's like, oh, okay, I remember him. He was one of the characters that you could use in Dragon Quest IV, but where is this blonde chick at? And then by random chance I saw something about swords, and it's like, oh, well, there we go. The spin-off character actually made it into a mainline Dragon Quest game in a sense. So
Wait. So you're telling me there's a Florette Super Nintendo, or not Super Nintendo, a DS Florette sprite out there somewhere?
it should be.
There's also a DS Florette sprite in Dragon Quest IX. She's one of the characters in the Stornway Inn, the special guests in the elevator.
Wow. Oh.
If you unlocked, and you should have it unlocked, Platty, because when you came to New York, we connected DS, and you got
Yeah.
the download of all the quests and characters and stuff from me.
Well, somebody, and I won't name names, realized since we can't really go out anymore these days, and swinging by the local craft store on the way to the grocery store recently, the line outside, standing 6 feet apart, was way too long. And being locked at home and needing a lot of perler beads, I did notice that the perler bead website had dropped their free shipping price down to $60. And I won't confirm that I spent $62 on perler beads or not recently, but I'm looking for some new Dragon Quest sprites to create with maybe some new perler beads I'm getting.
Right.
I'll have to look her up.
Sounds good.
So what are some other firsts? Talking about like some first things.
Yeah, well, we talked about tactics and battle. That was a first for the series. This is the first one that had an actual casino where you could play like blackjack and pull slots. I think in the original, up until then,
is that what it's called? Because I called it save scumming. I don't know why, but I called it save scumming.
It was the name I came up with. Actually pretty brutal. It was really hard in 4. It was much easier to manipulate in 6 with doing that, but and 11. But in 4, the best way to make money is through betting on the monster battles, and even that is extremely hard to predict. There's like all sorts of I tried to find some guides on GameFAQs for that, and I'm still like, all right, well, they say this is going to win 9 times out of 10, and it would just be wrong often.
Yep.
So
I remember when playing 3 for the first time, and that was the game that first introduced the Monster Arena. They could win extra gold at, and I remember playing the Game Boy Color version, and after a few tries of doing that, and even though picking the ones that looked like they were going to win just by remembering them from random encounters, and just totally getting screwed over by a weaker monster, it's like, yeah, you know what, this is not worth the time. And seeing it in Dragon Quest IV again, it's like, okay, well, steering well clear of that. Thanks, game.
Yeah, and that stinks because I mean, you could get a really good. I think it was either a Gingham Whip or like a something Metal King related, like a Metal King Shield.
Yeah.
But the RNG for that particular casino in Dragon Quest IV, like that's always the one I give it a shot, and then I remember how hard it is, and I just like give up and keep playing.
Yeah, I've always heard, like even back when I had first gotten back into the main games and got to the casino in 4. I remember reading, I think it might have been on the Dragon's Den, actually, or some other places where people would constantly say, like, oh, don't worry about the casino in Dragon Quest IV. It doesn't pay out very well. And every time I've tried it, it sure does not pay out well. That's why I usually just kind of avoid it in that one and just worry about it. And I don't usually do the casinos too often in the Dragon Quest games, but Dragon Quest IV is usually the one that I go in there to get Maya or to read the NPC dialogue, but otherwise it's like, yep, don't need to worry about playing this. I'll save my money.
Yeah, we talked about a little bit earlier. This is the first DQ game with monster recruitment. There are some NPC monsters that you like. Healy. Healy is actually optional. You can finish the chapter if you level up your Ragnar enough. Then he doesn't need it and can just get through and just plow through the final boss in chapter 1 with medical herbs. You can skip Healy entirely, but I think the other one is a dragon named Sparky.
Yeah, he's in chapter 5. Yeah,
I forget his name. It's like Doran or something in the I forget.
I totally forgot about him. Yeah.
Yeah,
but he's at your party all the way to the end of the game, right?
Yep.
Yeah, because what it is with that one, you go and save that Zenithian woman from the top of the Yggdrasil tree in chapter 5. You take her back to Zenithia, and then I don't remember why. I think they just give it to you as like either a thank you or as he's going to help you out, just sort of thing. You get Sparky the dragon, and he sticks with you until you do certain events at the post game. But we'll probably get to that in a little bit.
Yeah. And in terms of firsts, I can't really think of anything else. This isn't really a first, but I always thought it was kind of cool that like Sorrow he's kind of scouting out the hero's town in the beginning of chapter 5. Like if you actually go to the inn, Sorrow will be there like hanging out, and like some of the townspeople are like, oh, there's a wandering minstrel who like they mistake him for a minstrel, or maybe that was his class at the time, and he's just hanging out at the inn in the hero's hometown, and I think he's just kind of like scouting for the Zenithian there, and he just kind of snuck in by saying he was lost.
I remember like that dialogue. I didn't know that was. Don't really remember that was him.
Yeah, because you can actually skip it and not even go into the inn or just not really notice. And then, but he's much more recognizable in the DS version where they kind of vamped him out.
Yeah.
Mm.
Kind of like post Sephiroth redesign.
Sephiroth.
He does have a little look like that.
Yeah, the long silver hair and the mostly black attire doesn't help with that comparison either. So
Well,
I wonder. I don't know though if they did that on purpose or if that just was what Toriyama was like. There you go. There's your design for him.
Well, there was some non-Toriyama art that was in the Dragon Warrior. I think it was either the Nintendo Power or the booklet that shows you what Sora looks like, and he's much more decked out like a David Bowie look, like from Labyrinth. He looks kind of like that. I'm sure we can dig up that art somewhere and put it in the YouTube version.
Now I just want to see a video of somebody taking like the model of Pizarro from the Dragon Quest Heroes game, like from the Steam versions, put that in Source Filmmaker, and have him sing, like lip sing the song "Dance Magic Dance" from Labyrinth, like the David Bowie song. That would be hysterical.
Deep fake with Sorrow.
Oh my god, that was so funny. Oh goodness.
So, all right, yeah, we talked about the party chat being omitted in the DS version. That's another difference that didn't really sit right with fans. They probably heard the criticism on that one because it was back in there for the mobile version. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Is the mobile version the definitive version of this game for the West specifically?
I guess so, because that's a lot of dialogue, all that party chat.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but I can tell you from my experience, I had started with Dragon Warrior 3 on the Game Boy Color, and I played Dragon Quest 4 on the DS around the same time. And honestly, even though I found out later that the party chat had been removed, I really wasn't too bothered by the lack of the party chat, because from the opening chapters of the other 7 characters, I got enough of an impression from them, from their stories and their personalities, that when it came time for them to join in Chapter 5, I wasn't super bothered by the fact they weren't talking that much. And honestly, from playing other RPGs at that time, because I had been playing like some of the earlier Final Fantasy games on the Game Boy Advance remakes and stuff, your party really didn't talk unless it was specific points, and I just, I knew Dragon Quest 4 was a remake of an older one, so I didn't really think too much of it. Yeah, I am glad, though, that they did add in the party chat again, though, in the mobile version. So I definitely appreciate that they did that. But admittedly, it's kind of one of those things where I'm just like, about.
If you grew up on the NES version,
you don't know.
Yeah, if you grew up on the NES version, then it's probably not as bad. But it does flesh out the characters a little bit more.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
All right, absolutely. So Phil, I want to get back to something you were saying earlier, because you've said obviously
it's stuck in my head now. I can't stop.
Oh boy!
Sephiroth.
With that song, my buddies and I, we always used to think before they got to the part where they said Sephiroth that it sounded like the lyrics were going, "Hey, hey, look at these cinnamon ham and cheese." That's what it sounded like. And they got Sephiroth.
Well, before we got the Final Fantasy VII deviation going on here, by the way, Square Enix plug, go buy that remake in a couple days. But Phil, you've said, initially your first thoughts were, this doesn't hold up to the D&D Gold Box games that you were used to on the PC growing up. Where'd you get to your second and third impression that this
is it
ended
time
up
for
being
second and third impressions?
It's time for your second and third impressions, yes.
Okay. Wow, all right, I'm excited. So what happened was, I basically put that game on the shelf, played other games, and a year or two later, I had this really long summer, staying at home during summer breaks from school. My sister and I would just be stuck in our house all day long while my parents worked. And that's where I played E.T., by the way. Just sitting there playing the Atari. I had a summer of Atari games. It was boring as hell. But yeah, I was like, I'm gonna give this another shot, and I'm gonna play this game on its terms and just accept it. Kind of change my expectations, just accept it for what it is, type of thing. And my second impression, that second time I played through it all the way, and I beat it. And that's saying something, because there was no FAQs back in those days. I didn't have the hint book for it. I didn't have the Nintendo Power, magazine for it, if there is one. I didn't have any hints. And Dragon Quest games are known for having not only some secrets, but some things that get in your way for you to progress through the main story. And I know I can tell you, like going back and playing the original Dragon Quest in my crusade, as you mentioned before, playing through the entire series with my brother. Boy, it just stunned me how many things those early Dragon Quest games locked behind some very obtuse secrets, and if you got stuck on things, you just weren't continuing the game. So with Dragon Quest IV, I don't remember exactly if there was stuff that was stuck behind secrets, so to speak, that was necessary to progress the game. But I know some things could be obtuse and difficult. But I worked my way, through it. And one of the cool things was later on in the 5th chapter, while it took away your ability to control the party and the stories of the characters took a backseat, which was a huge missed opportunity, by the way. But what was kind of neat was that you got the wagon, and if you were fighting outside or in certain large dungeons, you could swap characters out in the fly during the fight, right? Am I mixing this up with another game? Yeah.
No. Yeah, you could hop in and out.
So what that did was it gave me back some of that strategy I was looking for, at least in certain dungeons or in certain overland areas. And there was like a couple of dungeons that let you take the wagon in, and they were tough. And being able to swap those people out made those things a lot easier to manage. It was really cool. So it was an epic story, and what it did, it whetted my appetite for more. It opened up the door for me to go out and buy Final Fantasy II, which is now known as Final Fantasy IV. But back in the day, it was Final Fantasy II on the Super Nintendo, and eventually the epic that is Final Fantasy III or VI, on the Super Nintendo, the last Final Fantasy game. We basically call it 6 nowadays, and you gotta understand, like. So when I bought Final Fantasy VI, it came out, it was $60. Now that's not, nowadays $60 is $60, but back in those days, $60 was a lot. I was making $4 an hour working at Taco Bell. Welcome to the border. Can I take your order? Would you like to try a Choco Taco today? Right? Like it took me forever to save up for a $60 game. Why was I willing to plunk down what was essentially half a week's pay for Final Fantasy VI? And it's all because of Final Fantasy IV, or I'm sorry, Dragon Quest IV. Dragon Quest IV, when I accepted it at its value, showed me the strengths and advantages that JRPGs have over the Western RPGs of its time, in its ability to tell this epic, sweeping story that really draws you in, because the characters are, in fact, pre-established. They can tell this tale that really draws you in, makes you want to care about it. You care about Tulun. You care about Alita. You care about the characters and what they're going through. It sets it up in those early chapters, and it didn't quite pay off, but it at least showed me that there was all this potential. When I stuck with it, and I really accepted the experience on its own terms, I realized that this was a whole different world. And Final Fantasy IV, and then especially Final Fantasy VI, which is to this day one of my top 3 JRPGs of all time, if not my favorite. It really showed me a whole different way to experience RPGs and to enjoy them. This idea that you're a character in a play that's fully written, fully orchestrated, and you can really, really enjoy it, as opposed to the Western RPG where you're making a character who's a blank slate and you're going to write his backstory from scratch and then go into this open world, experience and write your own story. A JRPG has already got the story written, and you're there just to experience it and everything that's already been pre-written. And that's what Dragon Quest IV, really showed me on that second go around. Later on, many, many years later, I decided to buy, of course, when the 3DS version, or the DS version was announced. The first thing I checked out was, while I liked Dragon Quest IV and I had a good second impression, again, as I mentioned, it just opened up the door for what I felt were much better JRPGs later on. But I was very, but one of the things that held it back, as I mentioned before, was the fact that my characters were controlled by the computer. So one of the things that I saw with this one was that, yes, in fact, you get to control the characters. And when I saw that was the thing on the DS version, I was like very excited. So I pre-ordered that garbage. Once I saw I could control the characters, I kept checking the game notes. And once I saw I could control the characters, I totally bought it right away. So My third impression was that, between the fact that you can control the characters in battle in the 5th chapter and the party chat, that I felt it was a better, more fleshed out experience for it. And it really held up well to this day, because it's still like a 30-hour experience. And a lot of the games these days feel like they have to be 50, 60, 70 hours. And this remake just says, no, you can have this really great 30-hour experience and have a really good time. And we won't outlive our useful, like, you can go out and play something else and you walk away with this really complete experience. And I think my third impression was that it's better nowadays, and it's a very great experience that I can recommend to anybody who has interest in turn-based JRPGs.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, and you made me. I took a couple of notes here as you were talking, because you reminded me of a couple of things. The first thing I wanted to touch on was the Baron's Horn. So you talked about the wagon. Not every cave allowed you to bring the wagon, because there were stairs, and realistically, you're not going to take the wagon down the stairs. Of course, they kind of forgot that in Dragon Quest VI, and it's just like you can take the wagon up and down stairs wherever you want. But in this game, if you took it into certain dungeons, you'd leave the wagon outside. So they had this item called the Baron's Horn. So when you finally get to that final boss and you're like climbing the mountain, you can sound the horn, and then I guess the wagon zooms to you or flies or floats over the mountain somehow.
Magic.
Yeah, exactly. The true magic of so the Baron's Horn, shout out. The other thing was the Tokuma guide. So I don't know if you remember this, but Dragon Warrior 3 came for NES, came with like a full walkthrough. The entire booklet that came with it was this thick walkthrough with a giant map and everything, and every single step of the game they basically document for you. Here's what you do next. Here's the recommended level. Here's screenshots of what everything looks like. Here's the monsters, and it gave you every little detail that you would find in any kind of modern FAQ or Brady guide or anything like that. And for Dragon Warrior 4, you could, at the very end of the booklet, was this little send away where you could send away for this Tokuma guide, and I think it was free. I don't exactly remember. But 12-year-old me, stupid me, did not realize that, like, I guess you could Xerox something, you could take it and you could make a copy of it. So I actually physically cut the booklet. I took scissors. 12-year-old me cut the booklet and sent it away for that. So I got this really cool guide, but then I just maimed my original Dragon Warrior 4 booklet forever.
All right, something else that Phil said, and then Liam, you touched on it too, about having the guide. Phil, you mentioned that, back then there were no guides and you just had to keep trying stuff until you did. This is the first game that I failed at, because I actually called the Nintendo helpline on this, and I don't know.
Was that like $1.99 a minute or some bull?
I have no idea how I convinced my father to let me call that phone number, but I do remember I was like, Dad, it's been a week. I have no idea. I think it was like the phone number, probably 1-900 or whatever it was, right in the back of Nintendo Power.
Where they made those games, like if you go back and you retro play some of these older games, I mean, they made some of these things so impossible to figure out. And what was really frustrating, and I said this before when it comes to RPGs, nothing frustrates me faster than a secret that's required in order to progress in the game. I love Order of Ecclesia, but I knocked it a full point off its score, which is saying something, because it deserves a great score. But I personally knocked off a point from it because in order to get to Dracula's castle, you have to rescue all the villagers in the town first. And I didn't know that. I just went through and it tells you rescue some villagers, and you rescue some villagers. And this is over multiple screens. And you get to the end and you fight this boss and you get this bad ending. And you're like, isn't there going to be a Dracula's castle at some point? And there's nothing telling you anything about this shiz. Now, the only thing there's a clue when at the end, when you die, it kind of shows you where some of these other villagers are at. And me being dumb and not being able to connect these two things together, I was like, why are they showing me these people for in these different areas? And then I couldn't even figure out where they were, because it didn't show you where they're at in context. But long story short is somebody had to help me out in FAQs and all this other jazz. But I hate it when secrets are required in order to complete the game. If there's some optional shiz pickles behind them, that's fine. Optional weapons, optional characters, whatever. But yeah, and that's Dragon Quest, especially early Dragon Quest games. Was there anything in 4 that fits that description? I know there was in like.
Well, I remember what I had to call about. I had to call because I was stuck. I could not get to the next town. Like, I'd been everywhere in the world. I'd sailed all over the world for a week. And it was, I hadn't used the magma staff to melt the mountain to get through this little mountain pass up in the northern part of the world.
Oh.
And I remember the guy on the telephone, he's like, open your inventory and tell me what objects you have there. Because at the time, unless you'd gone and dumped it off back with Talon's wife at the vault, you only had the 8 slots available to your characters to put stuff in. And I remember reading, and here, this guy's probably baiting me to stay on another couple minutes for $1.99 a minute. But he's like, so what do you have in your inventory? And I'm reading through it. And he's like, you have a magma staff. Have you used that somewhere? And I'm like, it's just a random weapon that wasn't stronger than anything I had, so I didn't equip it. He's like, no, you got to go up to this mountain area and use it. And he pointed me to the right point, and I'm like, oh, look at that. Thank you very much. But I call the helpline on this game. Phone a friend.
Okay, that's interesting. So yeah, I just that's the problem with puzzles. Is some people will get them and they'll click with them. Sometimes it might be a majority of the people. But if it doesn't click for you, it stops you from enjoying the game. Of course, nowadays, none of us think anything about going and FAQing something real fast. So back in those days, it was a major hurdle. And even for me today, being an older guy, and I work so many freaking hours, when I sit down with my last hour or two and play on a PlayStation game or something like that, the last thing I want to do is halfway through stop and have to look something up on my cell phone or whatever. I'm just too tired. I just want to play. I work on a computer all day, so it's still to this day one of my pet peeves. Don't put puzzles that prevent the player from progressing, or if you do, have some sort of mechanic in there that after they spend 10 minutes wasting their time with it, you kind of let them through or something. Mm-hmm. It's a lot easier with the D&D game because when our players are struggling and they can't get through, then as a DM, you can kind of start dropping hits, or you can say roll intelligence checks, because maybe your character knows even if you as a player don't know. Mm-hmm. You're stupid, but your character's smart.
Maybe.
Yeah.
If you can get a high enough stat.
So I did want to bring this up. There is a weird glitch in the Japanese Famicom version that a Japanese friend of mine told me about. That basically the weird glitch only works in the Japanese version, but when you're fighting any boss, if you choose to escape 8 times, each time it's going to fail because it's a boss. You can't run away from a boss. But if you do this 8 times in a row, for the remainder of the battle, all your physical attacks will be critical hits.
Whoa!
Yeah. So
look at that. There's your. If you can't get through it, there's a way around it.
Yeah, I mean, you have to survive getting attacked freely by a boss 8 times. But you.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, he'd get 8 free rounds of attacks on you.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to do that against Necrosaro. But yeah, if you do, then you just get nonstop critical hits. But unfortunately, that was only in the Famicom version, was not in the US version. Just a shout out to my friend Masa for telling me about that one.
All right, well, I'm going to skip ahead a little since you mentioned Necrosaro. So the final, we've mentioned him a few other times here that Sorrow is the main boss of Dragon Quest IV. What's funny is just this week in the mobile game Dragon Quest of the Stars that Liam was talking about earlier, they're having a Dragon Quest IV event right now, and he mentioned that you can have Ragnar and Alina as your 4th party member. In there, but in the promotional stuff and on the game, they gave Sorrow a last name. He is now Dragon Quest official canonized as Sorrow Banesword. How do you like that as a last name for him? Sorrow Banesword.
That's stupid.
I mean, I want to say, with a family name like Banesword, aren't you you're already doomed?
It's like Victor Von Doom. He's going to be a bad guy when he grows up.
His name is doomed. Yeah, I mean, it feels pretty unnecessary, finding out Palpatine's first name was Sheev.
What?
Which is that's just some stupid unnecessary canon they stuck into a Star Wars novel, like giving Emperor Palpatine a first name.
I mean, they could have just been Steve. I mean,
Yeah, there you go.
Steve.
Sheev Palpatine.
Steve.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
so what do you guys think? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sure Sorrow has a second name. It's just not instrumental to the game to know what it is.
Yeah, I don't really care that he has one. I think it's kind of weird they randomly give him one. Honestly, I think he's fine with just being known as Pizarro the Man. Well, I guess you guys might know. I call him Pizarro. I know the P's probably silent, but it's just a habit. Sorry, but I call him Pizarro the Manslayer, and I honestly think that title works better for him than just calling him, what was it, Banesword was his last name? What'd you say?
Yes.
Yeah, Banesword.
I mean, it's not bad, but it just makes him sound even more edgy than he kind of looks, so.
The name in Japanese, wasn't it Pizarro? Or it was Death Pizarro for Necrosaro?
Maybe.
It was, because it was like Pizzaro.
Yeah, it had pizza in it.
Yep, it was Pete. Yep, I remember that.
Pizarro. So maybe that's his name.
I don't call him that because of the Japanese thing by any means, but it's kind of like my thing with Bjorn, where before I realized how it was properly said, like the way I just read it in my head was Bajorn or Bajorn or something like that. So it's just sort of a habit to say it as Pizarro, even though that's probably the totally incorrect way to say it.
But you didn't call it BJ Orn?
So can we do Dragon Quest Hero spoilers at this point?
Oh yeah, Dragon Quest Heroes.
Dragon Quest Hero spoilers. You get Sorrow later on as a party member. If he dies in battle, because he's really not as strong as when you actually fight him as a boss, and you use a leaf on him, usually the character will say his name. And depending on which character you pick, they're either going to say Sorrow or Pizarro. So it is kind of it's debatable. You could pronounce it however you want. I like Sorrow because it sounds like the word sorrow, like SARROW.
Yeah, and that would fit in with how his story plays out too, and what the whole pun thing that Dragon Quest likes to do anyway.
And that leads perfectly right into what I was going to say. How do you like him as the antagonist of this game? Because it was all because of the love of a woman that this whole thing happened.
Yeah, she could have been Rose Banesword.
Oh my god.
It had worked out.
Now, see, I vaguely remember. I don't even want to attempt to say it. I know he was in love with Rose and human. And Zorro's like an elf, right? A dark elf, or
see, that's what I actually have that in my notes, because technically Pizarro is called a monster, but he looks like an elf, like Rose does, because Rose is an elf. Because that's why humans were hunting her down, because apparently she can cry ruby tears.
Right.
And I always thought that Pizarro was supposed to be an elf, but they always call him a monster. So I don't know if it's sort of like the like Dragon Lord or Hargon case, where when you see like Hargon's artwork, like especially in the original cover art for Dragon Quest II, like the original NES Famicom release, where you can see that Hargon has these human features, and I don't know if it's supposed to be like Pizarro's the same case where maybe he was once a man and he became a monster, or maybe he was once an elf, but because of his deeds he somehow became like a mutated elf and was classified as a monster. But the game never really talks about it, so I think if you call him a monster or an elf, I mean, you're going to be totally fine.
Right. He's described on dragon-quest.org as a powerful demon with a passionate hatred for humanity. He does look very much like an elf with the pointy ears, like he could be a dark elf.
Yeah.
You know.
And I probably got it, like Zachary said, about because Rose is the elf. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he was in love with Rose, this elf, and humans mistreated her. They liked mistreating her because every time she cried ruby tears, and hey, they got rubies, so just keep making her cry. And that's what turned him against humanity and set this whole he's the evil villain.
This is interesting. On, again, dragon-quest.org. In the Japanese cell phone remakes, Sorrow has the personality known as a tsundere, or tsundere.
What?
So,
so he's got like the Maribel thing.
Yeah,
Maribel.
It's the Maribel thing. So that's what kind of caught my eye. So if party chat is used while he's in the party, he usually does not appear interested in speaking to his new comrades, usually expressing annoyance if attempting to do so. Nevertheless, Sorrow will express both remorse and gratitude when due, such as visiting the hero's hometown in Rose Hill. So yeah, that's interesting. They're comparing him to Maribel in that case.
Yeah, that seems to be a popular character type in Japan, because if you look on forums and stuff, sometimes a lot of like the popular characters seem to be the ones that are like the "well, I don't like you, but I really do like you" sort of
Right.
personality or type of character. I mean,
someone who grows on you. I guess they kind of started. Maribel was the first of that in the Dragon Quest series, and then eventually they bring on Deborah in the remake of 5.
So
How do you
my
like his story? Or what do you... Oh, go ahead, Phil.
yeah, it kind of feeds into your question you're about to ask as far as how do you like his story or whatever. Like my take on Dragon Quest games as a whole, and especially with 4, is that the main plot is pretty damn boring. There's a bad guy, you gotta stop him, but that's not the point. Like with Dragon Quest games, it's about the journey, not about the destination. And especially in 4, those opening chapters are such a highlight as you get to know the characters are joining your party. Again, I wish they had followed through on that and really fleshed out afterwards. I feel like it's such untapped potential there that I have yet to really see too many games take full advantage of. But putting that aside for a minute, when you look at the series as a whole and what Dragon Quest IV does in, let's say, Chapter 5, which is the majority of the game, that's like 3/4 of the game is Chapter 5. You're going in your typical Dragon Quest game, you're going from village to village to village with your group of heroes solving their problems. That for the most part, these are just little pit stops on your way to solving the main villain thing. But as you play more and more of these Dragon Quest games, you realize that's the point. Helping people, going to these villages, hearing their cool little stories, solving them in a way that becomes kind of an addictive formula that, hey, I got a couple of hours, I got half a day, 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, I'm going to go and solve a village's problems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then I'm going to save, I'm going to do something else and come back to this another day. And you can do that. And you're not going to, even if you come back to a Dragon Quest game a month later, it's not like you lost anything on the main plot. Because there's a bad guy, go kill him. That's what this kind of stuff boils down to. It's just the antagonist. The overall, the big bad guys in these games have never been super deep. I say that without actually having beaten 7 or 8. So it's feasible that maybe one of those bad guys is just so awesome. But having played like 40 hours into 7, I still don't know who in the hell the bad guy is. So I'm not sure how fleshed out he could be. At Dragon Quest 8, they keep talking about him. I'm chasing after him. I've seen him do a couple of bad things, but I have no clue what his backstory is and whether or not I should care. So I almost feel like 7 and 8 are kind of following in these steps. But one of y'all could prove me wrong if I just get to those games, maybe. But my whole point is I enjoy the Dragon Quest games for the village stories that are along the way, and sometimes the character stories, depending on how well they're done, that are in the party.
Yeah, I remember the Chapter 2 story where you have to like save the fake princess.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you're the real princess, and nobody realizes that, and there's someone posing as you, and you have to save her and give up this artifact, like a crown or something like that, right?
Or is it the bracelet of transformation? Or
Oh yeah. The thing that basically helps Sorrow. You have to give it up to save this fake princess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because the party finds it and then they have to give it up for the ransom.
Yeah. I always thought that was pretty interesting. Like the princess could have said like, "Hey, I'm the real princess." That's just a fake. But you have to put yourself in harm's way to like save a complete stranger, which I thought was really heroic.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny, Phil, that you mentioned that these all come down to there's the bad guy, go get him, because we've got a group chat with Brian, who runs the Dragon's Den, which is the website we've all met at, Liam and Zachary and I. And we've got this group chat, and I want to say it was like 6 months ago when we were getting ready to talk to Nawaria, and she streams Dragon Quest X, the Japanese-only MMO. And I think Brian just kind of offhandedly said something about like, oh, what's the plot of Dragon Quest X? And I typed out that paragraph, and it was like, you wake up one day and you're the hero, and you find out things are going on, and you're sent out into the world, and you meet people, and you gather this, and you go to this town, and you keep going through the towns, and eventually this guy turns out to be the demon lord, and he's riling up the people, and you got to beat him and save the world. And I don't think I fooled Zachary, but like Brian's like,
you got me. Yeah,
I got you. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was like, wow, that sounds awesome.
And I was like, that's the plot of every single Dragon Quest.
I was like, man, I can't wait to play Dragon Quest X after that.
Yeah. Yeah, you know you have to listen. You know you have to play a Dragon Quest game. If anybody ever walks up to you and says, "What's the main plot of Dragon Quest?" Fill in the blank. All you have to say is, "Big bad evil guy. We gotta stop him. He's about to destroy the world." You're covered. Yeah, just you're covered.
Put me in medieval armor and give me some Koichi Sugiyama orchestral music and
understand. Like when we talk about the JRPG experience, Dragon Quest as a series is the one that set the tone. Like they were there. That is the first. I mean, right there, Final Fantasy. I think Dragon Quest was before Final Fantasy. It was the first game. Yeah, it was the first game. And then it became a series. And before the Nintendo era was even done, it already had 4 full RPGs. You know, it was already a full-blown series before the Super Nintendo even started. So it really set down all these expectations of what made a JRPG. And a lot of the stuff that we consider cliche back then was riveting and earth-breaking and all that other jazz. But I think what's really cool about your Dragon Quest series, but can also be detrimental depending on your perspective, is that it has over all of these years, up through Dragon Quest XI, which has just come out on your Switch, Dragon Quest XI's, is that it has really stuck to the formula. The graphics are better. The music sounds awesome. There's some deeper mechanics involved, but at the end of the day, it's a basic turn-based system. And I was a little worried when they first announced Dragon Quest XI and they were showing some gameplay. It started to look like an action RPG. Did any of y'all experience those concerns when they were first showing that gameplay and the hero was like running around while he was attacking, getting ready to attack the monster? It
started to look like that, yeah.
Yeah, and I was starting to get a little worried because that's the way Final Fantasy has gone with 13 and especially later games like 15. And I'm like, shit pickle, Square Enix is going to screw this series over too and turn it into something I'm personally not going to like. And I know I'm in the minority. I'm an old fogey, but I don't want to see my old series get turned into these action RPGs to appeal to the masses. Turns out, of course, that that's not really what Dragon Quest 11 is. It's still a typical turn-based game, and that positioning there is just there for looks. But yeah, I was just like, but that's what makes this series cool. Is they stuck to it, but they refined the formula. If you don't like Dragon Quest 11, you're not going to like turn-based JRPGs. I'm just going to say that now. Like your typical JRPG. Because it really is the refinement of what's there.
Something you mentioned, too, that just sparked a memory. Dragon Quest 4, Dragon Warrior 4, actually came out after the Super Nintendo. So I remember this, too, because it was kind of one of the tail end of the Nintendo era, like one of the last games to actually come out for it before they just stopped production and started making full-on Super Nintendo games. But it was actually, I think, a year later. So Super Nintendo came out in 1991, and Dragon Warrior 4 was October 1992. So
yeah, that makes sense because I was always really late to the game. Phil talking about paying $60 for a game, and I'm going back and saying, I'm surprised my dad let me call that phone number. I bought my Nintendo 3-4 years after it came out. I got the NES way late in the lifetime. I was actually just telling my son. He was playing Super Mario Brothers on the little $20 handheld emulator thing that he got a couple weeks ago with his allowance money or birthday money. And he was complaining about it and it's really hard and everything. And I'm like, oh, let me tell you, Brady, I used to go down the street. I made friends with the kid down the street who was a complete jerk just because I wanted to go over there and play Super Mario Brothers. That game that you're playing and complaining about because I said, we have the Nintendo Switch, and we got all these games and everything, and we have fun playing this, and you've played Dragon Quest Heroes since you were 3. I said, I was 10, 11, 12, and I still didn't have that. And I remember I even got my Super Nintendo used when my friend moved on to buy the Genesis, or maybe even the PS1, so I was always 3 to 4 years behind. So it was great that it still came out, thank goodness. I was still playing that. Everybody else was playing, Final Fantasy 2, Final Fantasy 4 on their SNES, and I was just like, yay, Dragon Quest 4, Dragon Warrior 4.
Yeah, I was just so stoked because 3 is such an amazing game that I just remember I remember just loving the fact that this was even releasing and just being really amped up to play it.
Yeah, I'm sorry I had to step away for a second, but I did hear where you were saying how this came out after the Super Nintendo, and that's absolutely true. And like, of course, my family was too poor to go out and buy the new systems when they came out, so yeah, I was still playing NES games well when people had Super Nintendos. I didn't get Super Nintendo till for a while, for at least a few years after it had been out. But the cool thing about Dragon Quest IV is that, and like some of the later NES games, they really, like Yoshi's Cookies and stuff, they really try to push the envelope on what that system could do as it was going into its twilight years, to kind of compete with some of the stuff that was coming out on the Genesis. And Dragon Quest IV, if you're going to compare it to, let's say, Final Fantasy IV, right? It doesn't look nearly as good. Like, you compare those side by side, it's clear which one's the Super Nintendo, which one's the NES game. If you listen to their synthesized music, it's clear which one's playing off of a better soundboard. But again, I think, Dragon Quest IV did such a great job of drawing you into those characters by telling you their story, by having those individual chapters, ahead of time, rather than just joining your party as you went along and kind of like pulling you in. And nothing against Final Fantasy IV. I love that game. But I wasn't as attached to the characters in Final Fantasy IV as I was in Dragon Quest IV, because I got to play them each for a few hours, got to live, especially in the case of Taloon, got to live out their daily life, and play through that. And in Final Fantasy IV, yeah, you got to play through like the main hero, at the beginning as he's kind of doing some of his paladin things or whatever and protecting the kingdom. But the other people like Rydia and whoever's joined the party, they can just kind of join as you come along. Then you destroy her village, yay! And it's just
yay!
Yeah. Sid will join in later on because of reasons, yay! And then these twins will come and they'll join along because they want to help save the world and they'll sacrifice themselves. Boo-hoo! But with Dragon Quest, had any of them done any of those things, you'd care a lot more because you lived their lives and you honestly were drawn into why were they willing to risk their lives to try to save the planet. And each one of them, as you play, you find out why. You're really drawn into it. As it was just so ahead of its time. It was just awesome. And in that respect, I think it could easily, beat most Super Nintendo games.
No disagreement from us Dragon Quest people here.
And if you disagree with me, you're wrong. Categorically wrong.
Well, we're getting ready to wrap this up, but a good thing to end on here before we kind of do a last final memory thing is the post game that they added to the DS. They called it. I don't actually think it pops up and says Chapter 6, does it?
No. I think it does.
Yeah, it does?
No, it doesn't. When you load up your save file, it just says Chapter 6.
Oh, okay.
They don't do like the whole intro music or anything like that.
No, there's no intro music for it, and there's no official chapter name for it either.
But it is Chapter 6. Okay, so I mean, it's been a while. I think I did not play Chapter 6 when I did the run-through on mobile a few years ago. So, I mean, it's been like 2008 plus, or I guess that's when it came out, since I did Chapter 6. All I really remember is you get Sorrow, and Liam, I see you wrote in there about the bonus bosses, Egg, Fu, and Young. They were pretty funny. But other than that, I don't really remember much of that.
Yeah, so there's three actual bonus bosses. One of them is this kind of extra plot they added in where a bunch of the top-ranking monsters under Sorrow are working to overthrow him. And you fight one of them, which is Eamon.
Oh yeah.
And the biggest challenge there, and I think he's like the final boss. But the biggest challenge there is that you have to do it with 4 characters without the wagon, because you go into Sorrow's castle, or his old castle anyway, and you don't have the wagon inside the castle. So basically, you just like go into the throne room and fight the guy with only 4 characters. And he's
Baron's horn.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Hulk, whereas like Sorrow is green and he's the Gray Hulk. So
it's just a palette swap of.
Yeah, it's a palette swap of the Sorrow fight, basically. But yeah, so then there was also these other bonus dungeon bosses. So like that was the fight that you could just fight if you go to Sorrow's Castle. But then there was a legit bonus dungeon with a bunch of random dungeon floors and everything. This isn't like I think this is original dungeons. I don't think this is reused dungeon floors like in 6 or in the remake of 3. But yeah, you get all the way to the end of the bonus dungeon, and there are these two random monsters arguing over which came first, the chicken or the egg, and their names are Egg Foo and Young. And behind them is this giant painting of a knight. And the fights, I remember the fights being really pretty hard because they do a lot of they do some strong attacks, but they also do like a lot of random. What do they call it?
Status effects.
Status effects, yeah. Like put you to sleep and paralyze and stuff like that. But so there, it was a fun, and I think the actual music while you're battling them is the casino music, which is also kind of funny. But yeah, so you when you beat them, the painting behind of the knight loses a piece of clothing, and you get that piece of clothing. So you get like a special demonic style armor that only Sorrow can wear. It would be cursed, I think, for everybody else, but if they can even equip it. But it's like the perfect optimal equipment for Sorrow once he's in your party in chapter 6. And by the end of it, you strip the knight down. You have to beat the Egg Foo and Young over and over again, probably like 5 or 6 times to get each piece of armor. You strip the knight down to his boxer shorts, and you beat him again. You get the shorts, and I forget if I think his hands are covering his junk, or he's got an Yggdrasil leaf down there or something. But it was just so funny and just so random to have that like stuck in there. But yeah, so that I think it was a year ago I played through that on the DS, the bonus dungeon for the first time because I'd never done it before. So yeah, it was quite funny.
Alrighty, then I guess we're good to then end it, and Liam will have you start, and then we'll get Zachary, and we'll end with Phil. Any last memories of the game?
Yeah.
Any last thing you want to talk about that we haven't talked about?
The NES game, the NES version, I think I wrote this on the Wikipedia, but for Dragon Warrior 4, there's a crescendo in the battle music, or the crescendo is the musical term for going from a soft sound to a louder sound. And that actually exists in the battle theme for Dragon Warrior 4 on NES. Subsequent versions of that, like the PlayStation version, I think the DS version, take that out. So it was very interesting to hear that, specifically that feature in a Nintendo game, because I think that's pretty rare. I think Top Gun has a fade out or a diminuendo, but yeah, up until then I didn't even think that NES music could do that, but it actually can, and they did it in Dragon Warrior 4. And then my favorite Dragon Quest music track is in this game, the Zenithian theme, when you're in the Zenithian castle, the unknown castle. Even when I played it as a 12-year-old, I loved it, and it's my favorite orchestral Koichi Sugiyama track today.
All right, Zachary.
Dragon Quest IV does have a kind of special place for me because it was one of the first ones that I played when I got back into the main series. And let's see, because I played that around the same time I started playing Dragon Quest III on my Game Boy Color. It was interesting jumping into Dragon Quest IV since it had much stronger accents and much more like punny writing. But really, I didn't think too much of the accents or the puns. I was just enjoying the experience. And I found that game a really good first step into the Dragon Quest series. And it's one that I had a buddy a few years ago when I was still in college who asked me, what are some good games to start out with. I told him that a good one to check out is either Dragon Quest IV or Dragon Quest VIII, specifically because Dragon Quest IV I feel that's a good introductory title versus like some of the other ones where it might be a little more story heavy, because with Dragon Quest IV you kind of get the gradual sense of playing, where with Ragnar you get just sort of the basics of the combat, and then when you get to Elena's chapter you have a little bit more available to you, since you have her as a fighter, but then you have your mage and your priest. And I always kind of recommended that as a good starting point, because for me that was a good starting point to get at, just because even though I randomly picked the game up myself, it was really cool to get into it and see how this series was, especially for an early title like this, which Phil kind of talked about when he was giving his impressions of the game earlier. And what I remember the most about Dragon Quest IV is that you do have a very good cast of characters. Everybody is different enough from one another where you do want to kind of swap out with them and, you know, use them for their different strengths or to try and cover weaknesses in your party. Like, even though both Borya and Maya are both mages that specialize in attack magic, like Borya is more of the supportive one who has more buffs and status ailments versus Maya, who has more of the attacking magic, and she learns the Puff/Bee Dragon spell. So I like that there's this real party dynamic, both in how the characters are personality-wise and appearance-wise, but also in combat. And really musically, I would say Dragon Quest IV is one of my favorites. I will hold that Dragon Quest VII has the best soundtrack of a Dragon Quest game, but Dragon Quest IV's, for me, is a really close second. Not just because of nostalgia, but because the songs themselves really reflect the game so well. It's probably one of the soundtracks I would say is probably one of the best. Like, even for, like, it's crazy to think this was originally an NES game when you listen to it.
Yeah.
Especially in the remakes and stuff, or the orchestral versions, how detailed it was and able to convey all this stuff. And it's why I love Sugiyama's music so much. Like, one of my favorite music themes is from Dragon Quest IV, and it's one of my favorite Dragon Quest song, period. It's Homeland, which is the hero/heroine's overworld theme when they're by themselves and before they have the full party with them. And I found that song so I don't know, when I first got into it, I just found that song so beautiful. And even when I was in college and we were doing some of our English courses about like Irish poets in one of my classes, I remember reading some of those poems, and the first song that I thought of was that song Homeland, because just the way that the poem flowed reminded me of how the song flows both in game and like in the orchestral version. And we had this big Twitter thing in that class and I shared that on there, and a lot of my classmates were like, you know, it's interesting that you pointed that out, and even my teacher kind of gave me a hard time for it, but in like a lighthearted, joking way that I did that. But even he agreed that, you know, I can see where you kind of got that impression. So I guess just to kind of wrap up my rambling with all that, Dragon Quest IV, I think, is one of the best experiences in the series, whether you're a newcomer to it or if it's one of the games that you haven't played yet. Like if you started with Dragon Quest 8 and 11 and you've really only played those ones, like Dragon Quest IV, that's one of the best games you can jump into because it's not overly complex, but you still have that customization, you still have a good story to it. You have a villain that's a lot more present through the game and has a lot more going on for him versus like some of the other Dragon Quest games where the villains are just, you might hear them, but you never actually get to physically see them until the very end of the game before the credits wrap up. So overall, just Dragon Quest IV, it's such a phenomenal game. Absolutely would recommend it to anybody.
Agreed. I'm not going to go on for more than a minute here because I think you guys have said a lot and Phil's done a lot to sell this game already. Like, I think all of you have. But as you guys were talking about that, I went and looked up what Liam was talking about, fighting the bonus bosses. And interestingly enough, went on YouTube, and this is someone who's on the Dragon Den. I recognize the name. Hero OT Linea. They always post when we have little contests or whatever. But they've got the battles there, and yes, right, as what Liam was saying, there's a painting of a guy hanging behind them as you're battling them, and sure enough, the last battle that you do, he's standing there with his hands covering his junk. And when you beat them one last time, the guy jumps out of the photo, and he's like, "Oh, thanks for saving me. I've been stuck in that photo a long time." And he's like, "I'd like to meet people." And you send him on to the immigrant town that they got. You tell them about that, and it's got the standard line like, "Oh, that sounds like a place I'd like to go." And he runs off. He's like, "By the way, my name's Old Man Bizarro," and he looks like an older guy with a lot of facial hair.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Is he naked in the immigrant town?
Yeah, he is. I remember that because what's weird though is when you talk to him in the immigrant town, he then is like, "I'm Old Man Pizarro. I am the queen of this lovely desert castle." Like he just starts spouting a bunch of crazy nonsense. It's the most random thing. I just remember reading that, and I'm like, boy, like when I replayed the DS version a few years ago, my first thought was, boy, I really wish the party chat was in this version, just so we could see what the party reactions were to him saying that line, because I imagine they would all just be like, "What the hell is he talking about?"
I want to know
Why
if
is he
that
still naked?
Yeah, well, yeah, that too. Yeah.
So he's like a drag queen version of Sorrow, but he's naked.
I don't know. He's like a big, buff, burly guy with like a handlebar mustache that he's covering his junk. And then he just calls himself the Desert Queen in that castle. Like he's on the first floor and like in the castle, I believe. Like when you first walk into it, when the immigrant town is fully evolved.
Mm-hmm.
It's so bizarre. It doesn't make any sense why he says that either. It just is
Well, it
crazy.
also doesn't make any sense why his name is Old Man Sorrow, because
That's true.
he's nothing like Sorrow.
Maybe it's his dad.
Well, I wonder if it's a localization thing, like if that's like something they added specifically to the English version, or if that name. I'm talking specifically about the name. If they used a different name in the Japanese original.
If you out there have made it this far into our episode and you have any information about this, go ahead and hit us up on Twitter at DQ Slime Time.
Is this
It
another
could be that
unsolved
Japanese
mystery?
thing where I know that was Jen. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
You or anyone you know. All right.
And so, Phil, we'll give you the last thing here. Any good memories of the game? Anything you haven't talked about? One last sales pitch.
You know, I think in listening to y'all talk about your different perspectives, and there was quite a bit of focus there on the music, which I really didn't touch on. Again, as kind of mentioned before, this whetted my appetite for things later to come. But one of the things that this game showed me that also differentiated from Western RPGs, I guess that music's a big important piece, because when you play the Dungeons and Dragons Gold Box games, or let's say Wizardry, 2 or 3 or whatever back in the days, or some of the Ultimate games, they didn't really have a lot of music, and they didn't really focus on graphics aside from just getting the job done, what needed to be done. Now, Dragon Quest IV on the NES doesn't have a real big focus on graphics. There was only so much the NES could do, but obviously a huge focus on music and storytelling. And then later on with later Dragon Quest games and Final Fantasy games, we see more in the JRPG realm. We see more of a focus on those elements. And it brings together this idea that, again, that it really draws you into the story, like a play, using everything that it can: sights, sounds, emotions, characterization, character growth, these elements that you see in any good play on a stage, or any good story that's being told like through a movie and stuff. That's what JRPGs really focus on, as opposed to the Western RPGs, which focus more on creating your own character, giving you an open world experience, and giving you these almost limitless possibilities. And there's nothing wrong with either one of these. They're just two different experiences. You can like one over the other. You can like them both, and it's fine. It's what you like. But Dragon Quest IV really broke some barriers in taking steps from the original first Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy I, and moving towards some of the more well-known JRPGs experiences of today, which of course we all know the pinnacle is really Final Fantasy VI. Let's be honest. Everyone knows that. It's just a given. Final Fantasy VII, meh. But yeah, I mean, if you are playing like let's say a Final Fantasy VII, the remake that's about to come out, and you're really enjoying that, or Dragon Quest XI's, or any of the other JRPGs that are out there, and these games where there are pre-made characters that are telling a story with a beginning and a middle and end that are really centric around those characters, with sweeping music, are characters you care about, epic stories and stuff, you gotta give thanks to games like Dragon Quest IV that really paved the way. And if you really want to learn more about your gaming, about the history of the hobby that you love so much, I can't recommend this game enough, because it's such a crucial piece of that history. And because of the numerous ways it's out there on your cell phones, it's out there on a DS, which works, a DS cartridge, which works just fine in your 3DS. I'm sure you could probably buy it off the eShop. It's probably there as well. Or if you're really into retro gaming and you actually have an NES or one of those systems that play NES cartridges, you can always get that. Last time I checked, it wasn't really that expensive because there were so many copies out there. But find a way to experience this if you want to understand more about your history, the history of this hobby, and what brought us to these sweeping games that we enjoy today. You won't regret it. It is just so well done. There's certainly games that don't hold up very well. I'm never going to recommend that anybody go back and play the original Dragon Quest II. As much as I enjoyed it, I don't think that's something that's going to have a broad appeal, or heaven forbid the Final Fantasy II on NES. Not going to do that to anybody. But Dragon Quest IV is a game that you can really enjoy to this day, especially one of the remakes that you can find on the DS or your mobile phone. You got to find a way to just play this game. It's a lot of fun.
All right. Well, thank you, Phil. Thank you very much. If you want to hear more of Phil's thoughts, go on over to RP Gamer. Check out the RPG Backtrack podcast. I think I've been on about a dozen of them. I'm on the latest one that was up there. We talked about the whole Mother series, and one day we'll get back together and do that Muso episode again. So check out Phil at RP Gamer and all of his stuff. So thank you very much, Phil, for being here.
It's my pleasure.
Yep. Thanks so much, Phil.
And thank you, Zachary, for being on as well again.
Hey, since I was on 3 times, do I get a free snow cone now? My punch card's getting full.
Yeah, I'll unsocial distance myself and drive up there and give it to you.
Sweet. I prefer cherry or strawberry, but I will also take orange.
So noted. You get orange or red. Got it.
Thanks for joining us, Zachary.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on.
And that's it for this episode of Slime Time. We do want to thank you guys again for being here to talk about Dragon Quest IV. You might have noticed that the only time we ever mention the word Patreon on here is when we say we don't use Patreon. We are all just longtime fans that want to speak about the game series we know and love so much. But if you do have some money you'd like to donate, consider sliding on over to the Dragon's Den at www.woodus.com/den. Click on the button that says support the site. Woodus has owned and maintained that site for over 20 years, and he'd appreciate any donation. Or you can use his Amazon affiliate link to make any purchases, especially ordering Dragon Quest S or 11S, like Phil was talking about, or any of the 3DS games, or if they still got the DDS games, or whatever else is on there. I'm sure a couple pennies will go Woodus's way if you buy through his affiliate link.
I think we have T-shirts too. I'm not. He showed me a design for that. Don't know if that's a thing yet, but if not, it should be soon. And if
Things
you're
to come.
Things to come. If you're an advertiser looking for a cool new podcast to spend lots of ad revenue on, reach out to us at slimetimepodcast@gmail.com. If you have any questions or comments for us, you can find us on Twitter at Plattym3 or at Riamu Celestian, or hit us up both simultaneously at DQ Slime Time.
Oh wait, that's funny. I see what you did there. I see that. You just slipped that in there. Just a little slime. You just slipped that in there. That's funny.
We did that. I think that was one of the first things that we were writing up our script for the beginning and end ages ago, a year ago. We wanted to do that.
We actually created the podcast so that we can throw that in there.
Just slime puns.
Put that line first, and then we just made the podcast around that.
Remember, you can get a hold of Phil through rpgamer.com, or you can check him out on Twitter at jcservant. And that'll all be in the show notes as well. So, if you would like to join in tons of Dragon Quest discussions, there's still the Dragon's Den forums, one of the few remaining Dragon Quest forums still around. You can find it over there at the Dragon's Den main page, or at www.woodus.com forums. I'm still there, crazily posting every day, every other day, keeping people up to date on Dragon Quest news and what games I'm playing. We'd also like to take a chance here and thank everyone who makes this possible, like Brian, aka Woodus, for his support of the series and this podcast, and making the YouTube version of our podcast, and for keeping the Dragon's Den lights on for decades.
That's right. If you want to watch this, if you want to re-listen to this podcast on the YouTube version, you get to see a picture of Old Man Sorrow holding his junk. And on that note, thanks to Amanda Lepre and the Descendants of Erdrick for allowing us to use their music for our podcast. Descendants of Erdrick is a video game tribute band from Austin, Texas. If you like what you've heard, check out their most recent album, Advent, at descendantsoferdrick.com, or on Twitter at @doferdrick. Or, when all this Corona crap is over with, go see their band leader Amanda Lepre live on tour as a guitarist with Andrew WK.
And thanks to Dwayne Bullock, our wonderful graphic artist and Dragon Quest fan, for making the awesome artwork cover for this podcast. And if we ever get those t-shirts, the He did the art for that too. Dwayne was on the original iteration of Slime Time podcast many, many years ago, and he's been on a couple other episodes with us. And you can check out more of his work at Dwayne Art on Instagram or his website, dwaynebullocart.bigcartel.com.
And if you're looking for more DQ podcasts, to check out our earlier episodes on Dragon's Den, Anchor FM, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and more, and show some love for our fellow DQ podcasts available like DQ FM and Puff Puff Hour.
Bye, everyone. Good night.
DQ Slime Time, sliming off. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay sane.